Rich woman hired a single dad as fake husband, only to realize he was the investor she rejected. She thought he was just a broke handyman, but when the cameras flashed and the truth dropped, the man she paid to pretend turned out to own everything she'd ever wanted. And the look on her face said it all. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window as Sam wiped down the breakfast dishes, his mind wandering back to Lucy's question from the night before. The gentle clink of plates in the sink echoed in the quiet house, a sound that had become all too familiar in the years since Sarah's passing. He glanced at the clock. 7:15 a.m. The voicemail from Grace Wentworth still nagged at him. "Dad?" Lucy appeared in the doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she wore the gentle, knowing expression that sometimes made her seem older than her 14 years. "You're doing that thing again." "What thing?" Sam dried his hands on the dish towel. "That thing where you overthink everything." She stepped forward and straightened his collar with familiar affection. "It's just a meeting." Sam smiled, touched by her perceptiveness. "When did you get so wise?" "Probably around the same time you started getting gray hairs from worrying too much." She grinned, then grew serious. "Really though, what's bothering you about this?" Sam leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. Something about the way she said unusual in that message. Rich folks and their unusual requests. He shook his head. "I'm just a carpenter, Lucy. I fix things, build things, simple and straightforward." "Maybe that's exactly what she needs," Lucy said softly. "Someone straightforward." The drive to Grace Wentworth's estate took Sam through the historic heart of Charleston, where ancient live oaks drip with Spanish moss and wrought iron. Gates guarded stories as old as the city itself. The contrast between his beat-up truck and the manicured perfection of Grace's neighborhood wasn't lost on him. As he pulled up to the house, the morning light caught the tall windows, making them gleam like mirrors. The architecture was classic Charleston, a 3-story antebellum beauty with a wraparound porch and columns that reached toward the sky. Yesterday, he'd been too focused on the job to really take it all in. Sam checked his watch, 7:55 a.m. He believed in being punctual, especially for the wealthy clients who seemed to count every minute as if it were made of gold. Grabbing his toolbox from the truck bed, more out of habit than necessity, he made his way up the front steps. Before he could knock, the heavy door swung open. Grace Wentworth stood there, perfectly put together despite the early hour. Her ash-blonde hair was swept into an elegant knot, and she wore a cream-colored blouse that probably cost more than his monthly mortgage payment. But something was different about her this morning, a slight uncertainty in her usual confident stance. "Mr. Nolan," she said, her voice carrying that cultured Charleston lilt. "Thank you for coming so early. Please, come in." Sam followed her through the foyer, noting how her heels clicked precisely against the hardwood floors. The house smelled of coffee and something floral, jasmine maybe. She led him not to the study where he'd worked yesterday, but to a sunny breakfast nook overlooking the garden. 2 coffee cups sat waiting on the round table, steam rising in delicate spirals. A leather portfolio lay between them, closed but somehow threatening in its formality. Grace gestured to one of the chairs. "Please, sit." She settled into her own chair with practiced grace. "I hope you don't mind coffee. I noticed yesterday you brought your own thermos." Sam lowered himself into the chair, feeling suddenly very aware of his work boots and the faint smell of sawdust that seemed to follow him everywhere. "Coffee's fine, thank you." He wrapped his calloused hands around the delicate porcelain cup, waiting. Grace's fingers drummed once, twice on the leather portfolio, the only sign of nervousness she'd shown. "Mr. Nolan." "Sam," he interrupted gently. "Just Sam is fine." A flicker of something, relief, crossed her face. "Sam, then." She took a careful breath. "I asked you here because I've been impressed with your work. The repairs you did yesterday showed not just skill, but an understanding of the historical integrity of this house. That's rare." Sam took a sip of coffee. It was excellent, of course, and waited. There was more coming. He could feel it. Grace opened the portfolio, revealing architectural drawings and what looked like renovation plans. "This house," she continued, "has been in my family for generations. It's seen better days, though we've maintained the facade well enough. What I'm looking for is," she paused, as if choosing her words carefully, "I need someone who can see beyond the surface, someone who understands that some repairs go deeper than wood and nails." Sam studied her face, noting the tiny cracks in her perfect composure. Behind her designer clothes and practiced smile, he recognized something familiar, the look of someone carrying a weight they weren't ready to share. Miss Wentworth. Grace? She said quickly, then looked surprised at herself. Grace? He amended. Why don't you tell me what you're really asking? She met his eyes then, and for a moment, the polished exterior fell away. I have a proposal, she said, one that could either be the biggest mistake of my life or exactly what this house, and perhaps both of us, needs. The morning light streamed through the windows, painting patterns on the table between them. 2 coffee cups, 2 people from very different worlds, and a proposal that hung in the air like an unfinished sentence. Grace's manicured fingers traced the edge of a document she'd pulled from the portfolio. What I'm about to propose is unconventional. She paused, her usual confidence wavering. I need a husband. Temporarily. Sam nearly choked on his coffee. Excuse me? For 1 week? She clarified quickly, her cheeks coloring slightly. It's a matter of appearances. My foundation's major funding cycle is approaching, and there's a crucial gala dinner next weekend. The board members are traditional. She smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her blouse. They've been questioning my commitment since the scandal with my ex-fiancé. Sam set his cup down carefully. Miss Wentworth Grace, I build things. I fix what's broken. I don't pretend. I understand your hesitation, she said, sliding a paper across the table. Sam's eyes widened at the number written at the bottom. This would cover your time and discretion. Sam pushed the paper back. That's not the point. I have a daughter. I can't teach her that lying is okay, even for a good cause. Grace's composed facade cracked slightly. The foundation supports educational programs for underprivileged children without proper funding. She took a steadying breath. I wouldn't ask if I weren't desperate. Your reputation in the community is impeccable. You're respected, hardworking, genuine, exactly what I need to convince the board. And Lucy, what am I supposed to tell her? The truth? Grace said simply, that you're helping someone in need. The money would cover her college preparation courses. And she hesitated. I noticed the vintage truck in your driveway yesterday. Sarah's, wasn't it? Sam's jaw tightened. You've done your research. I had to, but I also know it needs extensive repairs you can't afford right now. This arrangement could fix that. Sam stood up, needing space. The breakfast nook suddenly felt too small, too intimate. Through the window, he watched a gardener trimming the immaculate hedges. 1 week? 7 days, including the gala. Grace remained seated, her hands folded neatly. We'd need to be seen together a few times before then, establish a believable connection. But it would be strictly professional. No complications. Rules? Sam asked, still facing the window. Complete discretion. A signed contract protecting both parties. Clear boundaries. She paused. And when it's over, we go our separate ways. Sam turned back to her. I need to talk to Lucy first. Grace nodded, relief flickering across her face. Of course. Take tonight to discuss it, but I'll need an answer by morning. That evening, after a simple dinner of spaghetti and meatballs, Sam sat with Lucy on their worn porch swing, the same swing where he'd told her about her mother's diagnosis years ago, the same swing where they'd shared countless conversations since. So, Lucy said, pushing the swing gently with her foot, Miss Wentworth wants you to pretend to be her husband? Sam nodded, watching his daughter's face carefully. For a week, to help her foundation. And she's offering enough money to fix Mom's truck? Plus my college prep courses? Yes, but Lucy, that's not Dad. Lucy stopped the swing. Remember what Mom always said? Sometimes helping others means stepping outside your comfort zone. Sam's throat tightened. Sarah had lived by those words, right up until the end. Besides, Lucy continued, it's just pretend, right? Like when I played Juliet in the school play. I wasn't really in love with Tommy Martinez, but I made people believe it. Despite himself, Sam chuckled. This is a little different than Romeo and Juliet, sweetheart. Is it? Lucy's eyes held that wisdom beyond her years. You're both doing something uncomfortable to help others. That seems pretty straightforward to me. Sam wrapped an arm around her shoulders, marveling at how she'd grown into such a thoughtful young woman. When did you get so smart? Must be all those college prep courses I'm going to take, she grinned. The next morning, Sam found himself back in Grace's breakfast nook. She sat across from him, a contract between them, her pen poised expectantly. Lucy's okay with this? She asked. She is. Sam picked up the pen. But I have conditions of my own. Grace raised an eyebrow. Go on. First, no public displays of affection. Hand-holding if absolutely necessary, nothing more. She nodded. Agreed. Second, I keep my regular work schedule. This arrangement doesn't interfere with my other clients or my time with Lucy. Of course, Grace made a note in the margin. We'll coordinate appearances around your schedule. And third, Sam met her eyes firmly. When this is over, it's over. Clean break. No lingering obligations or complications. Something flickered in Grace's expression, but she masked it quickly. Absolutely. Shall we? She pushed the contract toward him. Sam signed his name, his carpenter's calluses rough against the smooth paper. Grace added, her elegant signature below his, then held out her hand. Partners? He took her hand, noting how small it felt in his, how perfectly manicured her nails were compared to his work-worn fingers. A peculiar sensation passed between them, something uncomfortable and electric that neither acknowledged. Outside, thunder rolled across the Charleston sky, low and warning. Grace withdrew her hand quickly, standing to close the window against the approaching storm. The weather service mentioned this system might last all week, she said, her voice deliberately casual. Sam watched the dark clouds gathering, feeling oddly like he'd just set something in motion that neither of them fully understood. Storms always pass eventually. Grace turned from the window, and for a moment, their eyes met. The thunder growled again, closer now, and both of them pretended not to notice how the sound matched the uncertainty in their hearts. Stand still, Mr. Nolan, the tailor muttered around a mouthful of pins. Sam fought the urge to fidget as the elderly man worked on his suit jacket. The three-way mirror reflected angles of himself he'd never seen before, and honestly, didn't recognize. Grace sat in a plush leather chair nearby, her legs crossed elegantly at the ankles. The charcoal gray was the right choice, she said, studying him with a critical eye. It brings out the silver in your temples. Sam resisted touching his hair self-consciously. The suit probably cost more than his monthly mortgage payment. I feel like a kid playing dress-up. Nonsense. You clean up quite well. Grace consulted her phone, all business. Now, while Giuseppe finishes, let's review. We met at the Charleston Garden Society fundraiser last spring. Right. Sam winced as a pin pricked his shoulder. You were admiring the hydrangeas. Blue hydrangeas, Grace corrected. Details matter in this world, Sam, and you offered me your umbrella when it started raining. Very romantic, Sam said dryly, earning a sharp look from Grace. Our whirlwind courtship was kept private due to my public profile, she continued. We married in a small ceremony in Savannah 3 months ago. The tailor stepped back, examining his work. Sam took the opportunity to loosen his collar. Grace, I build things with my hands. These people will see right through me. They'll see what they expect to see. Grace stood, smoothing her cream-colored dress. Now, let's work on your table manners. An hour later, Sam sat at Grace's formal dining room table, surrounded by more forks than he'd ever owned. Working from the outside in, he muttered, reaching for what he hoped was the correct salad fork. No, Grace sighed. That's for fish. Here. She reached across, her perfume briefly filling his senses as she pointed to the proper utensil. Let's try again. Sam picked up the correct fork, then gestured to the array of wine glasses. And these? White wine, red wine, water goblet, and champagne flute. Grace demonstrated with each one. Though honestly, just follow my lead. What if someone asks how we met? Sam selected a piece of imaginary lint from his sleeve. I mean, beyond the basics? Grace's expression softened slightly. The best lies contain truth. Tell them how your late wife loved gardening, how you still tend her roses. She paused. That part about you is real, isn't it? Sam nodded, surprised she'd remembered that detail from their first meeting. Sarah's roses are Lucy's favorite part of our yard. Something flickered in Grace's eyes, but before she could respond, tiny footsteps thundered down the hallway. Aunt Grace! Aunt Grace! 7-year-old Lily burst into the dining room, her dark curls bouncing. She stopped short at the sight of Sam. Who are you? Lily, darling, this is Mr. Nolan. Grace's whole demeanor changed, softening as she reached for her goddaughter. He's going to be helping me with some work this week. Lily studied Sam with unabashed curiosity. You look like a prince in that suit. Sam grinned, dropping into a theatrical bow. Why, thank you, Princess Lily. Though I'm more of a frog than a prince, I'm afraid. Lily giggled, and to Sam's surprise, so did Grace, a genuine, unguarded sound that transformed her face. "Back to your nanny, sweetheart," Grace said, still smiling. "We have that party tonight." The cocktail party was held in a historic mansion on the Battery, Charleston's most prestigious address. Sam tried not to gawk at the crystal chandeliers and original hardwood floors as Grace guided him through the crowd. "Remember," she whispered, "you're successful, but humble. Let them do most of the talking." As it turned out, Sam didn't need to pretend. His natural warmth and genuine interest in others drew people in. When the chairman of Grace's foundation mentioned renovating his vintage sailboat, Sam's eyes lit up. They spent 20 minutes discussing woodworking techniques while Grace watched, bemused. "Your husband is?" "Refreshing," Grace, Mrs. Hollingsworth, a key board member, said later. "No pretense at all." Sam overheard and smoothly joined them, placing his hand lightly on Grace's back. "My wife is the remarkable one," he said. "Did she tell you about her plans for the children's art therapy program?" Grace looked up at him, momentarily startled by both his touch and his knowledge of her project. She hadn't realized he'd been paying attention when she'd mentioned it earlier. The evening flowed more easily than either had expected. Sam's quiet confidence and obvious devotion to his wife charmed even the most skeptical socialites. When he brought Grace a fresh glass of wine, perfectly selected, she couldn't help feeling a spark of pride. Later that night, they returned to find Lily still awake, pleading for a bedtime story. Grace started to object, but Sam stepped in. "One quick story," he said, winking at Grace. "If it's okay with your aunt?" Grace nodded, watching as Sam scooped up the little girl. "You're a natural with her," she said softly. "I've had practice," he replied, heading for the stairs, though Lucy's a bit old for piggyback rides these days. Grace stood in the foyer, listening to Lily's delighted giggles fade as they climbed to the second floor. Despite herself, she smiled, enjoying the unfamiliar warmth in her chest. When Sam turned at the top of the stairs to flash her a quick grin, she quickly composed her features, but the feeling lingered. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Grace's elegant breakfast nook, casting warm squares of light across the marble countertops. Sam stood at the stove, his sleeves rolled up, flipping pancakes with the same care he gave to crafting fine furniture. The familiar scent of butter and maple syrup filled the air. "Can I have chocolate chips in mine?" Lily bounced on her toes beside him, her pink pajamas decorated with unicorns sparkling in the morning light. Sam smiled down at her. "Well, let's see what. You're what Miss Grace says about that." "She always says yes when I make my princess eyes," Lily demonstrated, batting her eyelashes dramatically. Sam chuckled, reaching for the bag of chocolate chips he'd spotted in the pantry. "Just a few then, while she's not looking." Lily clapped her hands quietly, conspiratorially, as Sam sprinkled a modest handful of chocolate chips into the cooking pancake. In the background, Grace paced near the French doors leading to the garden, her phone pressed to her ear, speaking in clipped tones about fabric shipments and deadline extensions. "You make them just like Daddy would," Lily said softly, watching the pancake bubble. Sam's spatula paused mid-flip. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "In my stories. The daddy in my head always makes pancakes on Sunday." Lily traced patterns on the counter with her finger. "And he's tall like you, and he smiles nice." Sam's throat tightened. He'd had similar conversations with Lucy at that age. After her mother passed, the weight of a child's need for family settled heavy in his chest. Grace's voice grew louder as she approached. "No, that's completely unacceptable. The event is in 3 days." She stopped at the kitchen entrance, her face softening at the sight of Lily helping Sam plate the pancakes. "Mommy," Lily called out, "look what my daddy made." The phone slipped from Grace's hand, clattering on the marble floor. Her face went pale, then flushed pink. "Lily, sweetie, it's okay," Lily continued, oblivious to the tension. "I know he's my daddy now. You said so." Sam set the spatula down carefully, his eyes meeting Grace's across the kitchen. She looked stricken, like a deer caught in headlights. "Lily," Sam said gently, kneeling down to the little girl's level, "I'm just helping your mommy with some grown-up things for a little while. I'm not, but she said." Lily's lower lip trembled. "She said you were staying with us, and that's what daddies do." Grace rushed forward, gathering Lily into her arms. "Sweetheart, I'm so sorry. I didn't explain it well." Her voice wavered. "Mister, Sam is just helping us for a few days." Lily's small shoulders slumped. "Like the other helpers who go away?" The pain that flashed across Grace's face made Sam's heart ache. He watched as she pressed her lips together, clearly fighting back emotions she didn't want to show. "Why don't we eat these pancakes while they're hot?" Sam suggested, trying to ease the moment. "Maybe we can make funny faces on them with the chocolate chips?" Lily nodded slowly, but her earlier excitement had dimmed. They sat at the breakfast table, the crystal chandelier above them feeling suddenly too fancy, too formal for the raw moment they'd just shared. After breakfast, while Lily was distracted by her coloring books, Grace pulled Sam aside into her study. The morning light caught the unshed tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "She asked me last week why she doesn't have a father like her. Friends do." I panicked. I told her someone special was coming to stay with us for a while. She wrapped her arms around herself. I didn't think she'd jump to conclusions. Sam leaned against the desk, crossing his arms. "Kids have a way of hearing what they hope for." "I've given her everything I can," Grace said, her perfectly maintained facade cracking. "The best schools, clothes, toys, but she just wants—" She broke off, turning to look out the window. "A family," Sam finished quietly. "Sometimes the things money can't buy are the ones that matter most." Grace's shoulders tensed. "I thought I could be enough." "Hey," Sam said softly, moving to stand beside her. "You are enough. But it's okay to admit that this life you've built might be a little lonely sometimes." She turned to him, surprise evident in her eyes. For a moment, he saw past the designer clothes and carefully applied makeup to the woman underneath, someone who'd built walls so high she'd forgotten how to let anyone in. The day passed in a blur of activities meant to distract Lily from the morning's revelation. They baked cookies, played board games, and watched an animated movie in Grace's home theater. Sam noticed how Grace kept reaching for her phone, then stopping herself, as if forcing herself to be present. When evening came, Sam helped tuck Lily into her princess-themed bed. Her small hand caught his as he pulled up her covers. "Will you read me a story?" she asked sleepily. "Of course, princess." He picked up the book from her nightstand and began to read, his voice soft and warm in the dimly lit room. By the time he finished, Lily was almost asleep. He gently kissed her forehead, a gesture that came naturally after years of doing the same with Lucy. "Good night, sweetheart," he whispered. "Night, Mr. Sam," she murmured back. Later, in the quiet of the guest room, Sam lay awake staring at the ceiling. The room was luxurious, all Egyptian cotton and memory foam, but his mind was too busy for sleep. He thought about Lily's hopeful face at breakfast, about Grace's careful masks, and the moments they slipped. He thought about his own daughter, who'd once looked at him with the same need for answers about family and love. A strange warmth had taken root in his chest, something he couldn't quite name. It felt like more than sympathy, different from the clinical detachment he'd planned to maintain during this arrangement. Whatever it was, it made the elaborate bed feel too big, too empty, like something or someone was missing. The grand ballroom of the Charleston Heritage Hotel sparkled like a faceted diamond. Crystal chandeliers cast their warm glow over polished marble floors, while arrangements of white roses and hydrangeas adorned every table. Grace stood before her full-length mirror, adjusting the diamond pendant at her neck. "You look beautiful," Sam said from the doorway. He wore a perfectly tailored black tuxedo that made him look like he belonged in this world of wealth and privilege. Grace turned, her emerald green gown catching the light. "Thank you." She paused, studying him. "You clean up rather nicely yourself. Lucy helped me with the bow tie." 3 YouTube videos later, we finally got it right. His easy smile made something flutter in her chest. The drive to the gala was quiet, filled with nervous energy. This was the moment everything hinged on, the foundation's biggest night of the year. Grace's fingers twisted in her lap until Sam reached over and gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "It'll be fine," he said softly. "Just breathe." Inside the ballroom, they worked the room like a practiced couple. Grace introduced Sam to board members and donors, while he charmed everyone with his genuine warmth and down-to-earth manner. She watched in amazement as he drew people in, making them feel truly heard. During dinner, Samuel Morrison, one of the foundation's biggest potential donors, asked Sam about being a momaring, single parent before meeting Grace. "The hardest part," Sam said, his voice gentle but carrying across the hushed table, "was watching Lucy try to be strong for me after her mom passed. She was only 8, but she'd leave these little notes around the house saying, 'I love you, Daddy,' or 'You're doing great.'" He paused, emotion thick in his voice. "One morning, I found her trying to make breakfast. There was cereal all over the floor and milk everywhere. But she looked up at me with the biggest smile and said, "I wanted to take care of you like Mom did." Mrs. Morrison dabbed at her eyes with her napkin, and several others at the table looked deeply moved. Even Grace felt her throat tighten. "That's when I knew," Sam continued, "that love isn't just about what we feel. It's about what we do with those feelings. Every day since then, I've tried to be worthy of my daughter's faith in me." The moment hung in the air, profound and touching. Mrs. Morrison reached for her husband's hand, whispering something that made him nod firmly. When Grace rose to give her speech, she found herself looking at Sam more than anyone else. "Love and family are the foundation of everything we do," she said, her voice strong and clear. "They're what give us the strength to reach out and help others, to build something larger than ourselves." The room burst into applause when she finished. Mr. Morrison stood up and raised his glass. "To Grace and Sam," he announced, "who remind us that true love and family values are alive and well. Your foundation will have our full support." The dance floor opened up after dinner. Sam led Grace out for their first dance, one hand warm against her back, the other holding hers with gentle confidence. The music swelled, "The way you look tonight," and they moved together as if they'd done this 100 times before. "You're full of surprises." Grace murmured, "Where did you learn to dance like this?" "Lucy and I took lessons before her first father-daughter dance," he admitted. "I didn't want to embarrass her." Grace's heart squeezed. Every time she thought she had Sam figured out, he revealed another layer of thoughtfulness that took her breath away. As they turned, she caught glimpses of people watching them with soft smiles, clearly touched by what they saw as a perfect marriage. But Sam's expression grew more distant as the evening wore on. He was still attentive and charming, but something had shifted behind his eyes. On the drive home, he barely spoke, his hands tight on the steering wheel. Grace wanted to ask what was wrong, but the words stuck in her throat. The silence felt heavy with things unsaid. When they pulled into her circular driveway, the house lights cast long shadows across the manicured lawn. She turned to him, suddenly not wanting the evening to end like this. Without thinking, she leaned over and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek. His skin was warm, and she caught the faint scent of his aftershave. Sam went very still. When he finally looked at her, his eyes were full of something she couldn't quite read. "I think," he said quietly, "I should go." Grace sat at her mahogany desk, scrolling through news coverage of last night's gala on her tablet. Morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her home office, catching the silver frame of her foundation's first award. Her perfectly manicured finger tapped each headline with satisfaction. "Charleston's Power Couple Charms at Annual Foundation Gala," she read aloud, a small smile playing on her lips. The photo showed her and Sam looking every bit the devoted husband and wife. His gentle hand at the small of her back, her genuine laugh at something he'd whispered. They looked real. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Sam stood in the doorway, holding 2 paper coffee cups from her favorite local cafe. He wore his usual work clothes, worn jeans, and a faded blue button-down, but something about his expression made her pause. "I thought you might need this after last night," he said, placing 1 cup on her desk. The familiar scent of her preferred vanilla latte wafted up. "Thank you." Grace wrapped her hands around the warm cup, studying him. "The coverage is excellent. Your speech about family values really resonated with the donors." Sam didn't smile. He remained standing, his own coffee untouched. "Grace, there's something I need to tell you." The serious tone in his voice made her stomach tighten. She set down her coffee and straightened in her chair. "What is it?" "Do you remember a meeting last year? Someone pitched a community housing project for single parents?" Grace frowned, thinking back. Vaguely. It was an interesting concept, but too risky. The numbers didn't add up. "The numbers weren't the problem," Sam said quietly. "You said it was too idealistic, too focused on heartstrings instead of bottom lines." The memory clicked into place. Grace remembered a passionate presentation about creating affordable housing with built-in childcare and job training facilities. "That was you?" Sam nodded. "I spent 6 months developing that proposal, researched similar successful projects in other cities, had investors lined up." His voice remained calm, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "You didn't even look at the financial projections before dismissing it." Grace felt the blood drain from her face. You took this job to get close to me? To what? Expose me? Get revenge?" "No." Sam set his coffee down with careful precision. "I heard about the gala coming up, saw you needed maintenance work done. I was curious about who you really were, beyond that boardroom persona." "So this whole time," Grace's voice shook slightly. You've been studying me? Like some sort of experiment? I never planned to stay this long. Never expected. He trailed off, running a hand through his hair. I should have told you sooner. But then there was Lily and get out. The words came out as a whisper. Grace, get out. She stood up, hands pressed flat against her desk to hide their trembling. You lied to me. Used me. That's not. Sam took a step forward, then stopped. His face softened with something that looked dangerously like pity. I never wanted revenge. Grace, I just hoped you were more than I thought. The quiet disappointment in his voice cut deeper than anger would have. He turned and walked out, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Grace sank back into her chair, staring at the 2 coffee cups on her desk. The morning sun still streamed through the windows, but it felt colder now. She picked up her tablet again, looking at the photos from last night. His gentle smile, her unguarded laugh. All of it had been, no, she wouldn't let herself finish that thought. She stood and walked to the windows, looking out over her meticulously maintained garden. The roses were in full bloom, each bush perfectly, shaped every petal exactly where it should be. Just like everything else in her life, controlled, manicured, precise, and utterly empty. The realization hit her with physical force. She pressed a hand against the cool glass, seeing her reflection overlaid on the garden below. The carefully styled hair, the expensive blouse, the professional mask she wore so well. It all looked hollow now. Sam's words echoed in her mind. I just hoped you were more than I thought. Was she? Grace stood alone in her glass-walled office, looking out over her manicured garden, feeling more barren than ever before. The evening sun cast long shadows across Sam's modest living room as he sat in his worn leather armchair, staring at his phone. No calls, no messages, just silence from Grace's inn for the past 3 days. The small house felt both comforting and confining, a familiar shelter that somehow made his heart feel heavier. Lucy watched her father from the kitchen doorway, holding 2 mugs of hot chocolate. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and worry creased her young face. Dad, she said softly, patting across the room in her sock feet, your chocolate's getting cold. Sam looked up, managing a small smile as he accepted the mug. Thanks, sweetheart. Lucy perched on the arm of his chair, something she'd done since she was little. You know, it's okay to miss her. I don't. Sam started to protest, but Lucy cut him off with a knowing look. Dad, I've seen that face before. It's the same one you wore after Mom died, when you thought I wasn't looking. She touched his shoulder gently. You're doing that thing where you build walls again? Sam sighed, the chocolate untouched in his hands. It's complicated, Lucy. Most good things are. Lucy's voice carried a wisdom beyond her 14 years, but that doesn't mean you should give up on them. Across town, in her pristine office, Grace sat alone among the trappings of her success. Designer furniture, awards, and certificates lined the walls, measuring sticks of achievement that suddenly felt hollow. Her usual perfectly pressed outfit felt constricting, and her manicured nails tapped restlessly against her desk. She pulled open her bottom drawer, reaching for a file she'd retrieved from the archives. The paper was slightly yellowed at the edges, Sam's original project proposal from a year ago. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. The first page held a simple sketch of a community center surrounded by modest homes. Sam's neat handwriting filled the margins with notes about shared gardens, childcare facilities, and workshop spaces. It wasn't flashy or elaborate, but it breathed with life and purpose. As she read deeper into the proposal, tears began to blur her vision. Sam had included stories from single parents he'd met through his church, their struggles, their dreams, their resilience. He'd thought about everything. Flexible payment plans, skill sharing, programs, even a tool library where residents could borrow what they needed for home repairs. How could I have been so blind? Grace whispered, touching a water-stained page where Sam had written, Every parent deserves a safe place to raise their children. Every child deserves a community that believes in their future. A tear fell onto the paper, joining old water stains. Grace had dismissed this project because it hadn't fit her polished image of success. She'd measured its worth in prestige rather than purpose, in status rather than impact. Sunday morning found Grace standing uncertainly outside Sam's small church. She'd never felt more out of place, her designer dress stark against the modest surroundings. The service had just ended, and people were filtering out into the sunshine. She spotted Sam immediately, talking with an elderly couple near the steps. Lucy stood beside him, noticed Grace first, and nudged her father. Sam turned, surprise flickering across his face. Grace stepped forward, her usual confidence nowhere to be found. "Could we talk?" Sam hesitated, then nodded toward a wooden bench beneath an old oak tree. They sat, leaving careful space between them. The last churchgoers drifted away, leaving them in relative privacy. "I read your proposal again," Grace said quietly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "The real one? From last year?" Sam remained silent, waiting. "It's beautiful," she continued, her voice catching. "Not because it's perfect or prestigious, but because it's real. It's what people actually need." She turned to face him fully. "I was wrong to dismiss it. I was wrong about a lot of things." "Grace," Sam started, but she held up a hand. "Please, let me finish. I've spent my whole life measuring success by the wrong standards. Status, image, influence. I thought they meant something." She gave a small, sad laugh. "But you see people, real people, and you build things that matter." Sam's expression softened. "Slightly, everyone deserves a chance to build a good life." "Yes," Grace agreed fervently. "That's why I want to reopen the deal. Not the fake marriage, but the housing project. Your vision, your leadership, my resources and connections." She paused, vulnerability clear in her eyes. "If you're willing to try again." Sam was quiet for a long moment, considering. The breeze rustled through the oak leaves above them, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell chimed. "It would have to be different this time," he said finally. "Complete transparency, equal partnership." Grace nodded quickly. "Absolutely. No more games, no more pretense." Sam stood up slowly, hands in his pockets as he thought it through. Finally, he gave a single, decisive nod. "Okay, we can try." As he turned to leave, Grace called after him. "Let's build something honest, this time." A week after their conversation at the church, Sam pulled his weathered truck into the community center's cracked asphalt parking lot. The old brick building sprawled before him like a wounded giant, paint peeling from its weathered walls in long, curling strips, windows spiderwebbed with fractures that caught the morning sunlight, and a faded sign that hung at a dejected angle, its letters so worn they were barely legible. The whole structure seemed to sag with decades of deferred maintenance and broken promises. But underneath the decay, Sam could see the bones of something solid, something that could be saved. Grace's silver Mercedes glided into the space beside him moments later, its pristine surface a stark contrast to the neglected surroundings. She stepped out wearing casual clothes for once, dark jeans that actually looked lived in, and a simple white cotton blouse with the sleeves rolled up to her elbows. Without her usual designer armor of tailored suits and statement jewelry, she looked younger somehow, more approachable. Sam noticed how the morning light softened the sharp edges of her carefully, maintained composure, revealing glimpses of the woman beneath the polished exterior. "This is it?" Grace asked, her voice carrying a note of uncertainty as she surveyed the building with those appraising green eyes that missed nothing. She tucked a strand of honey blonde hair behind her ear, a gesture Sam was beginning to recognize as a sign of her discomfort. "This is home base," Sam replied, grabbing his rolled-up blueprints from behind the truck's bench seat. The papers were worn soft from handling, edges yellowed with age and hope. "But the real story is over here." He led her around the side of the building, their footsteps crunching on gravel and scattered leaves. As they rounded the corner, 3 acres of empty land stretched out before them like a blank canvas, waiting for an artist's touch. Tall grass swayed in the gentle morning breeze, creating waves of green and gold that rippled toward the horizon. A few ancient oaks stood sentinel across the field, their massive trunks scarred with age but still strong, their spreading branches creating pools of dappled shade that would be perfect for children to play beneath. "I know it's not much to look at now," Sam said, carefully spreading the blueprints across the warm hood of his truck. The metal was still dewy from the morning air, and he smoothed the papers flat with calloused hands that had built countless dreams from nothing. "But try to imagine this. 12 family units arranged in a horseshoe pattern around a central courtyard, a shared garden space where kids can learn to grow their own vegetables, a playground with real equipment that won't break the first time someone uses it." His finger traced the detailed drawings as he spoke, each line representing hours of careful thought and planning. Each home built to last a lifetime, designed specifically with single parents in mind. Affordable rent that won't eat up half their paycheck, shared childcare resources so nobody has to choose between work and watching their kids, community support that actually means something. Grace leaned in closer, her shoulder almost brushing his as she studied the meticulously detailed drawings. The scent of her perfume, something light and floral, mingled with the fresh morning air. "These are actually impressive," she admitted, and Sam could hear the surprise in her voice. Her manicured finger followed the layout of the proposed buildings. "The flow between private and communal spaces is really thoughtful. Did you design all of this yourself?" Sam nodded, feeling heat creep up his neck. "Been working on them for years, refining every detail. Every family I've helped with repairs or renovations taught me something new about what single parents really need, like wider doorways for when you're carrying groceries and a tired toddler. Mudrooms that can actually handle the chaos of kids coming in from play. Kitchens designed so you can cook dinner while helping with homework. I know some people who might be very interested in this," Grace said slowly, her business mind clearly spinning through possibilities. "The Winston Foundation has been focusing on family stability initiatives this year, and Sarah Chin's investment group has been actively looking for community projects with real social impact." "Those are some pretty big names," Sam said carefully, trying to keep the hope out of his voice. He learned not to count on promises from wealthy people, no matter how well-intentioned they seemed. "They trust my judgment." Grace met his eyes directly, and he saw something shift in her expression. "And I'm starting to trust yours." Over the next few days, they fell into an unexpected rhythm that surprised them both. Morning meetings at the community center gradually evolved into afternoon work sessions at Grace's sprawling estate. Her formal dining room, AC, a space that had previously hosted charity galas and board meetings, transformed into their makeshift war room. The polished mahogany table disappeared beneath a sea of architectural plans, zoning permits, funding proposals, and coffee-stained legal documents. Grace's housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, initially fretted about the mess, but even she began bringing them fresh coffee without being asked. During one particularly intense session focused on budget projections, Lily wandered in from the garden clutching her beloved stuffed giraffe, a threadbare creature she'd named Mr. Spots. Her small face was flushed from running around outside, golden curls escaping from the ponytail Grace had carefully arranged that morning. "Daddy Sam, will you push me on the swing?" she asked, using the name that had started as a slip of the tongue but now came as naturally as breathing. Sam's heart squeezed tight at the sound of it. He glanced at Grace, who was suddenly very interested in a zoning document that she'd already read 3 times. "Sure, sweetheart, just for a little while." Through the tall windows that overlooked the backyard, Grace found herself watching Sam push Lily on the old rope swing that hung from the ancient oak tree. Her goddaughter's delighted laughter floated back to the house like music, pure and joyful in a way that made Grace's chest ache with longing she didn't quite understand. Sam's face was transformed as he played with the little girl, all the worry lines smoothed away by genuine happiness. The next afternoon, Lucy arrived to work on homework while Sam and Grace prepared for a crucial meeting with potential investors. The 14-year-old spread her textbooks across the kitchen island, but it wasn't long before Lily discovered her presence and appointed herself as Lucy's shadow. Soon, the younger girl was giving Lucy an elaborate tour of her entire stuffed animal collection, complete with detailed backstories for each creature that involved princesses, talking vegetables, and at least one dragon who was apparently lactose intolerant. Mr. Spots used to live in a castle, Lily explained with utmost seriousness, holding up the giraffe. But then he had to move because the queen was allergic to giraffes. That's why he came to live with me and Grace Mama. Lucy listened to every word with the patience of someone who understood what it meant to need stories that made sense of loss. "Your daughter is absolutely wonderful with her," Grace said to Sam later, as they stood together watching the girls play an elaborate card game that seemed to involve more giggling than actual rules. They were sprawled across the patio stones, Lily's blonde head bent close to Lucy's darker one as they whispered conspiratorially. "She had to grow up fast after her mom died," Sam replied quietly, his voice carrying the weight of old pain. "But somehow, she never lost her kindness, never let grief make her bitter." Grace reached out without thinking and touched his arm briefly, her fingers gentle against his rolled-up sleeve. "You did an incredible job raising her, Sam. That kind of compassion doesn't happen by accident." The compliment hung between them, warm and unexpected, before Grace pulled her hand back and pretended to be fascinated by the garden sprinklers. As the project gained momentum, their days stretched into evening work sessions that neither of them seemed eager to end. Takeout containers from various restaurants littered Grace's usually pristine home office, creating a landscape of discarded Thai food cartons, pizza boxes, and empty coffee cups that would have horrified her just weeks earlier. Sam noticed how she'd started kicking off her expensive heels under the desk, how her perfectly maintained posture gradually relaxed as the hours went by, how she'd begun twisting her hair up with whatever pen was handy when she was deep in thought. She caught him looking once during a particularly late session and raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Nothing," he said, fighting a smile. "Just nice to see the real Grace sometimes." A flush crept up her neck, and she turned back to her laptop screen with more focus than the email she was reading probably deserved. One particularly productive Friday, when they'd finally secured preliminary approval from the city planning committee, Grace surprised herself by suggesting they celebrate with dinner in the backyard. She ordered pizza. Real pizza, Sam noted with approval, watching her scroll through the menu on her phone. Not that fancy stuff with goat cheese and arugula that cost $40. The girls eagerly set up the wrought iron patio table while Sam and Grace carried out mismatched plates and cold drinks from the kitchen. The evening was absolutely perfect, warm but not humid, with a gentle breeze that made the string lights Grace had hung earlier sway like fireflies against the darkening sky. Lucy took it upon herself to teach Lily the proper technique for folding pizza, New York style, demonstrating with the kind of earnest instruction usually reserved for much more important life skills. Grace actually ate with her hands instead of cutting each bite with surgical precision, getting sauce on her fingers like a normal person. Sam unleashed a steady stream of terrible dad jokes that made everyone groan and laugh in equal measure. "Tell the one about the pizza again," Lily demanded, cheese hanging from her small chin in delicious rebellion against table manners. "I can't," Sam said with mock solemnity, his eyes twinkling. "It's too cheesy." The girls dissolved into fresh giggles while Grace rolled her eyes dramatically, fighting a smile that threatened to break through her composure entirely. As the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, their laughter echoed across the perfectly manicured lawn, creating ripples of joy that seemed to settle into the very foundations of the house. The sky transformed into a canvas of pink and gold above them, painting everything in warm, forgiving light. Lily eventually curled up in Sam's lap, her small body growing heavy, with contentment as sleep began to claim her. Lucy and Grace discovered they'd both been reading the same mystery novel and fell into an animated discussion about whether the butler could possibly be the killer. In that moment, surrounded by the gentle warmth of shared contentment and simple joy, none of them were pretending anymore. They weren't a wealthy philanthropist and a working-class carpenter trying to navigate the complicated waters of business partnership and unlikely attraction. They were just a family sharing dinner in the backyard. Their happiness as natural and necessary as breathing. Sam caught Grace's eye across the table as she laughed at something Lucy had said about the book's ridiculous red herrings. She was smiling, not her carefully crafted society smile that never quite reached her eyes, but something softer and infinitely more real. The fading sunlight caught in her hair like spun gold, and Sam felt that familiar warmth bloom in his chest again, stronger now and impossible to ignore. Looking at them all together like this, Lucy's animated gestures as she spoke, Lily's peaceful face as she dozed against his shoulder, Grace's unguarded laughter ringing out across the garden, it was getting harder and harder to remember this wasn't supposed to be real, that this was just temporary, just business, just pretend. Because it felt like everything he'd never dared to hope for again. The morning sun cast long shadows across the newly paved driveway of the model home. A red ribbon stretched across the modest front porch, swaying gently in the spring breeze. Sam stood to the side, his hands clasped behind his back, watching as people gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Grace emerged from her car wearing a simple navy dress, a far cry from her usual designer outfits. She carried a folder of papers and smiled warmly at the small crowd of community members and local officials. "Quite different from the gala, isn't it?" she said, stepping beside Sam. He nodded, adjusting his tie. "Better this way. Real people, real purpose." The mayor approached the podium they'd set up on the lawn. Behind him, the single-story home stood as a testament to what collaboration could achieve. Warm beige siding, white trim, and a covered porch perfect for summer evenings. "Today marks the beginning of something special," the mayor announced. "Thanks to the partnership between Grace Wentworth's foundation and local builder Sam Nolan, we're creating homes for families who need them most." Sam felt Grace's hand brush against his arm as they were called forward. Together they gripped the oversized scissors, their fingers overlapping. The ribbon fell away to enthusiastic applause. After the speeches and handshakes, Grace touched Sam's elbow. "Walk with me?" she asked, gesturing toward a nearby nature trail. Spanish moss hung like silver curtains from ancient oak trees as they strolled along the packed dirt path. Their footsteps crunched on scattered pine needles, and somewhere above them, a cardinal called. "I was wrong about you," Grace said suddenly, stopping beneath a massive oak. "That day you pitched the project, I saw numbers on a page instead of hearts in need." Sam leaned against the tree trunk, hands in his pockets. "We all make mistakes. I wasn't entirely honest either, taking that handyman job to prove a point." "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Honestly," he turned to face her, "at first, it was about showing you what you'd dismissed. Then," he paused, searching for words, "then it became about knowing you, the real you." Grace stepped closer, her designer heels sinking slightly into the soft ground. "And what did you find? Someone who hides behind perfection because she's afraid of being seen as flawed." His voice softened. "Someone who loves deeper than she lets on, especially with Lily." "You see too much," Grace whispered, but there was no anger in her voice. "Maybe that's not a bad thing." The breeze stirred Grace's carefully styled hair, and she didn't bother fixing it. Sam noticed how different she looked here, away from her marble and glass world, more real, more touchable. "I spent years building walls," she admitted. "After James left me at the altar, I thought control was the answer. Perfect house, perfect career, perfect image. Perfect loneliness," Sam added gently. Grace's eyes welled up. "Yes, until a carpenter showed up and started taking down those walls, one board at a time." Sam reached out, brushing a tear from her cheek with his thumb. The touch lingered, and Grace leaned into his hand. Their eyes met, and the space between them seemed to dissolve. They moved closer, drawn together like leaves in a current. When their lips met, it wasn't the rushed passion of movie kisses or the polite peck of social obligation. It was gentle, warm, and honest, like coming home after a long journey. Sam pulled back first, his hand still cradling her face. "Let's not rush," he said softly. Grace nodded, understanding in her eyes. "We have time." The walk back to their cars was quiet, but it wasn't the tense silence of their early days. This silence felt full of possibility, like the pause between movements in a symphony. Later that evening, Sam sat at his kitchen table, reviewing construction plans for the next housing unit. Lucy bustled around, making hot chocolate. "Dad," she said, setting a mug in front of him, "you're blushing." "Am not," he protested, but his ears turned redder. "You totally are," Lucy grinned, dropping marshmallows into their drinks. "Something happened with Grace today?" Before Sam could answer, his phone buzzed with a text. Grace had sent a photo of Lily in her pajamas, holding up a crayon drawing of 4 people holding hands. "Lily just asked if you're going to marry me for real this time," Grace's message read. "She's quite the matchmaker." Sam smiled, feeling warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with hot chocolate. "Dad?" Lucy raised an eyebrow, smirking at his expression. "Drink your cocoa," he said, but he couldn't hide his smile. Grace sat at her mahogany desk, surrounded by stacks of financial reports and architectural drawings. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she refined the funding proposal for the single-parent housing initiative. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her home office, she could see Sam teaching Lily how to plant flowers in her garden. The sight made her smile. "Just a few more projections to add," she murmured to herself, checking her watch. The board meeting was tomorrow, and everything had to be perfect. The doorbell chimed. Grace looked up to see Celeste Halperin gliding into her office, wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit and a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Grace, darling," Celeste said, settling uninvited into one of the leather chairs. "I thought I'd stop by to discuss tomorrow's presentation." Grace's shoulders tensed slightly. "Of course, Celeste. What's on your mind?" "Oh, just doing my due diligence as head of the finance committee." Celeste's manicured fingers drummed against her leather portfolio. "This housing project is quite a departure from our usual initiatives. Some might say it's surprisingly personal." Outside, Lily's laughter floated through the window as Sam lifted her up to smell a flowering branch. Grace fought to keep her expression neutral. "The Foundation's mission has always been about community impact," Grace replied carefully. "This project aligns perfectly with that goal." Celeste's eyes narrowed slightly. "And your husband's involvement isn't influencing your judgment?" Before Grace could respond, the sound of boxes being moved drew their attention. Lucy appeared in the doorway, carrying a small box of decorations. "Miss Wentworth, Dad wanted to know which paint color you preferred for the Reynolds kitchen. the sage green or the warm gray? Grace's heart warmed at the teenager's thoughtful expression. The sage would be lovely, Lucy. Thank you. Celeste watched the exchange with calculating eyes. After Lucy left, she asked, "The rental?" Sam and Lucy are temporarily staying in one of the foundation's properties while their house undergoes repairs, Grace explained, trying to sound casual. It's giving us valuable insights into the practical needs of our future residents. How convenient. Celeste stood, smoothing her skirt. Well, I look forward to your presentation tomorrow. Every detail will be thoroughly examined, I assure you. After Celeste left, Grace's hands shook slightly as she reached for her phone. She needed to warn Sam about the increasing scrutiny. Later that afternoon, Grace joined Sam and the girls at the rental house. The modest three-bedroom home smelled of fresh paint and possibility. Lucy and Lily were working together to arrange throw pillows on the couch while Sam finished touching up the kitchen walls. The sage green was definitely the right choice, Sam said as Grace entered, paint splattered on his old t-shirt. It makes the whole space feel alive. Grace ran her hand along the freshly painted wall. It's perfect. She hesitated, then added, Sam, we need to talk about Celeste. Before she could continue, Lily bounded over. Grace, look at the pictures Lucy helped me hang. She grabbed Grace's hand and pulled her toward the hallway where family photos were arranged in a careful pattern. Grace's throat tightened as she noticed how seamlessly photos of all four of them had been mixed in with Sam and Lucy's existing ones. That evening, after the girls were asleep, Sam and Grace sat on the rental's back porch. Crickets chirped in the darkness as Grace explained her concerns about Celeste's investigation. She's always been threatened by my influence on the board, Grace said, wrapping her arms around herself. If she discovers our marriage was fake. Sam reached over and took her hand. We'll figure it out. The project is solid. It deserves to succeed on its own merits. Grace squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his quiet confidence. But her moment of peace was short-lived. The next morning, Grace arrived early at her office to prepare for the board meeting. She was reviewing her presentation one final time when her door swung open. Celeste strode in, clutching a manila folder. I did some digging, Celeste announced, without preamble. Her voice was sharp with triumph. No marriage license, no wedding announcement, not even a single social media post about your supposed wedding. She dropped the folder on Grace's desk. Were you ever actually married? Grace stared at the damning evidence, her carefully constructed world beginning to crack. The morning sun streamed through the windows, highlighting every detail of this moment she dreaded since the arrangement began. But now, facing Celeste's accusatory stare, Grace felt something unexpected. Not just fear of exposure, but fierce protectiveness over the real family bonds that had grown from her pretense. She lifted her chin, meeting Celeste's gaze directly. The truth hung between them, waiting to shatter everything Grace had built, both the lies and the love that had unexpectedly grown from them. The morning sun hadn't yet burned through Charleston's morning fog when Grace's phone erupted with notifications. Her hands trembled as she opened the local news website. There, splashed across the screen in bold letters, was the headline that would shatter everything. Charleston socialite's fake husband exposed. Grace's coffee cup slipped from her fingers, splattering across her pristine white kitchen floor. The article, authored by an anonymous source, detailed how she had hired a local handyman to pose as her husband for social events. Even worse, it included photos from the gala, their tender moments now tainted with speculation and scandal. Her phone rang. It was Sam. Have you seen it? His voice was tight, controlled. Sam, I can explain. Explain what? That you never corrected anyone after the gala? That you let people keep believing we were married? Grace pressed her fingers against her temples. I didn't actively encourage it. I just didn't deny it when it came up. That's the same thing, Grace. His voice cracked with disappointment. Do you know what this looks like? What this does to my reputation? To Lucy's life at school? The sound of footsteps made Grace turn. Lily stood in the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit, eyes wide with confusion. Where's Sam? The little girl asked. Grace covered the phone. I'm coming to get my things, Sam said through the phone. Lucy and I are done. Please, let's talk about this. We're past talking. The line went dead. Within an hour, donors started calling. The Harriman Foundation pulled their $1 million pledge. The Charleston Heritage Society requested an emergency meeting. Her social media feeds exploded with accusations of fraud and manipulation. Sam arrived just before noon, Lucy trailing behind him. The teenager wouldn't meet Grace's eyes as they gathered their belongings from the guest rooms where they'd been staying. Sam? Grace tried one more time, following him down the hallway. The housing project. We'll continue without you. He cut her off. I've already spoken to the other board members. They're willing to work with me directly. I never meant. That's the problem, isn't it? Sam turned, his face etched with hurt. You never mean to hurt anyone. You just calculate everything so carefully that the collateral damage doesn't register until it's too late. Lily appeared at the top of the stairs, her face streaked with tears. Daddy, where are you going? Sam's expression crumpled. He knelt down as Lily ran to him, wrapping her small arms around his neck. I have to go home now, sweetheart. But this is home, Lily insisted. You and Lucy live here now. No, honey. Sam's voice was gentle but firm. That was just pretend. I don't want it to be pretend. Lily's voice rose to a wail. You can't leave like my other daddy. Grace felt each word like a physical blow. She watched as Sam carefully disentangled himself from Lily's grip, pressing a kiss to her forehead before standing. Lucy, he called softly. His daughter emerged from the guest room with their bags packed. Grace reached for Lily, who was sobbing uncontrollably now. Sweetheart, but Lily pulled away, running to her room and slamming the door. Sam paused at the front door. I trusted you with my heart, Grace. With my daughter's heart, I thought you'd changed. The door closed behind them with a quiet click that seemed to echo through the suddenly empty house. Grace stood frozen in the foyer, listening to Lily's muffled cries from upstairs. That evening, Grace sat alone in her foundation's boardroom, staring at the wall of photographs, chronicling years of charitable work. Outside, she could hear the growing crowd of protesters. Their signs cast shadows through the windows. No more lies. Fraud for the wealthy. Who can trust a fake? Celeste had orchestrated her takedown perfectly. The article had exposed not just the fake marriage, but hinted at years of social manipulation. Every careful step Grace had taken to build her reputation was being rewritten as calculation and deceit. Her phone buzzed with another message from her crisis management team. They wanted to schedule an emergency press conference, craft a statement, control the narrative. But the only narrative Grace could focus on was the sound of Lily's tears and Sam's words. I trusted you with my heart. Through the boardroom windows, she watched more protesters arrive. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. But Grace felt only the growing darkness inside her chest. She had built her life on maintaining the perfect image, on never showing weakness or vulnerability. Now those paper-thin walls were crumbling, and she was left facing the truth about herself in the harsh glare of public scrutiny. Lily's last words before crying herself to sleep echoed in her mind. Did Daddy leave again? Grace placed her hand against the cool glass of the window, watching her perfectly constructed world fall apart on the other side. For the first time in years, she didn't try to calculate her next move or plan her response. She simply sat there, feeling the full weight of what she'd lost by trying to control everything and everyone around her. The morning sun filtered through unfamiliar curtains as Sam sat at his friend Mike's kitchen table, staring into a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. 2 days had passed since the scandal broke, but the hollow feeling in his chest hadn't budged. The local news had run with the story, turning their fake marriage into headline fodder that spread across Charleston like wildfire. Dad? Lucy's voice broke through his thoughts. She stood in the doorway, already dressed for school, her backpack slung over one shoulder. You haven't touched your breakfast. Sam managed a weak smile. Not very hungry, sweetheart. Lucy dropped her backpack and slid into the chair across from him. I saw Lily's text messages. She misses us. Sam's jaw tightened. The thought of Lily, confused and hurt, made his heart ache. But the image of Grace, allowing those marriage rumors to persist even after their arrangement had ended, still stung like a fresh wound. Dad, Lucy continued, her voice gentle but firm. Remember what Mom used to say about broken people? Lucy, sometimes broken people don't lie. Lucy pressed on. They just don't know how to be honest. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Mom taught me that, and I think Grace is broken in her own way. Sam sat back, studying his daughter's face. When had she gotten so wise? Since when? Did you become the parent here? Since you started moping around like a teenager? She teased, then grew serious. I saw how you looked at her, Dad. The real her, not the fancy designer everyone else sees. Sam stood up and walked to Mike's kitchen window, looking out at the modest suburban street. It was so different from Grace's manicured estate, yet somehow he missed the warmth they'd created there together. I trusted her, Lucy. We were building something real, or at least I thought we were. Maybe that's what scared her, Lucy suggested. Mom's been gone 5 years, but you're just starting to open up again. Grace probably has her own walls. Sam closed his eyes, remembering Grace's face when Lily had called him daddy. There had been such vulnerability there, such longing. Had he been too quick to judge? He spent the morning in Mike's garage, working on a wooden jewelry box. His hands needed something to do while his mind churned. Around noon, his phone buzzed with a news alert. The headline made him pause. Wentworth Foundation head takes full responsibility. The article detailed how Grace was meeting personally with each donor who had withdrawn support. She wasn't hiding or making excuses. Instead, she was offering her own personal funds to keep the housing project alive. She's trying to make it right, Lucy said from behind him, making him jump. She must have come home for lunch, in her own way. Sam set down his tools and sank onto a workbench. I just don't know if I can trust her again. Dad, Lucy sat beside him. Remember when I was 12 and I lied about where I went after school? Sam nodded. Lucy had claimed she was at the library but had really gone to the mall with friends. You were so disappointed, she continued, but you told me something I'll never forget. You said trust isn't about never making mistakes, it's about what we do after we make them. Sam felt something loosen in his chest. He pulled out his phone and looked at the last text from Grace, sent yesterday. I'm sorry, not just for the scandal, but for being too afraid to be honest. With you, with myself, with everyone. He hadn't responded. Later that afternoon, Sam found himself kneeling in Mike's small backyard garden. The familiar motion of prayer brought some peace, even as he wrestled with his feelings. Lord, he whispered, give me clarity. Show me the path forward. A memory surfaced Grace's face during their first real kiss on that moss-draped trail. There had been no pretense then, no walls, just raw, honest emotion. Inside, Lucy was setting the table for dinner when an envelope arrived. Sam recognized Grace's elegant handwriting immediately. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. The letter was simple, written in Grace's precise hand. Sam, even if you never forgive me, know this project will still be built. Grace. He ran his thumb over the words, feeling the slight indentations in the paper. In those few lines, he could read her determination, her regret, and maybe, just maybe, her hope. The autumn breeze rustled through the elementary school playground as Lucy waited by the fence during recess. She clutched a worn copy of The Little Prince in her hands, watching the swarm of children racing around the jungle gym. Her heart clenched when she spotted Lily's familiar bouncing curls. Lucy. Lily's voice carried across the playground as she broke away from her friends. The 7-year-old ran full speed, her navy uniform skirt fluttering, before launching herself into Lucy's arms. You came. Lucy hugged her tight, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo and sugar cookies. Of course I did. I promised to return your book, didn't I? Lily pulled back, her small face scrunched with concern. But where have you been? And where's your daddy? Grace cries at night when she thinks I'm sleeping. Lucy's chest tightened. She gestured toward the swing set. Want to talk for a minute? They walked hand in hand to the swings, their height difference more pronounced now. Lucy helped Lily onto one of the rubber seats before taking the swing next to her. Do you ever miss someone so much it hurts right here? Lily asked, pressing her hand to her heart. She kicked her legs gently, making the swing sway. Like when my real mommy and daddy went to heaven? Lucy blinked back tears, remembering similar conversations with her dad after her own mother passed. Yeah, I do. I miss my mom like that sometimes. I miss your daddy, Lily said softly. He gave the best hugs and made funny voices when he read stories. She twisted the swing's chains, looking up at Lucy with eyes too wise for her age. Grace misses him too. She keeps looking at the door like she's waiting for someone. Lucy dug her sneakers into the wood chips beneath them. My dad, he's hurting right now. Sometimes grown-ups need time to figure things out. But I pray every night for him to come home, Lily insisted. Sister Margaret says, God listens to children's prayers extra special. So he has to come back, right? A tear slipped down Lucy's cheek before she could catch it. Lily reached over and patted her hand with the innocent comfort only children can offer. Don't cry, Lucy. I'm sharing my prayers with you too. Lucy pulled Lily into another hug, their swings creaking together. You're pretty amazing. You know that? The school bell rang, signaling the end of recess. Lily squeezed Lucy one last time before jumping down. Will you come back soon? I'll try, Lucy promised, watching as Lily joined the line of students heading inside. She stayed on the swing long after the playground emptied, thinking about the way love could build bridges between the most unlikely people. That evening, Lucy sat cross-legged on her temporary bed in Mike's guest room, holding Grace's letter. She'd found it in her dad's jacket pocket while doing laundry. The envelope was still sealed, but the edges were worn, as if someone had handled it many times without opening it. "Dad?" she called out, hearing him pass in the hallway. "Can you come here for a minute?" Sam appeared in the doorway, his face tired but gentle. "What's up, kiddo?" She held up the letter. "You haven't read it." He stiffened slightly. "Lucy, I saw Lily today," she interrupted, watching his expression soften at the mention of the little girl. "She prays for you every night, Dad. She thinks you'll come home." Sam sank onto the bed beside her, running a hand through his graying hair. "It's not that simple. Maybe it is." Lucy pressed the letter into his hands. "You taught me that running away never fixes anything. That's what Mom would say too." Sam stared at the envelope for a long moment. "When did you get so wise?" "Must be those college prep classes," she said with a small smile. "Dad, I know you're hurt, but we can't leave things like this, even if you just want to say goodbye properly." He turned the letter over in his planned hands, his fingers tracing Grace's elegant handwriting. "You really think we should go back?" Lucy leaned her head against his shoulder. "I think we need to, for all of us." Sam was quiet for several minutes, just holding the letter and breathing slowly. Finally, he reached for his phone and dialed a number he hadn't deleted, despite everything. It rang twice before Grace's voice came through, soft and uncertain. "Sam?" He closed his eyes, feeling Lucy's supportive hand on his arm. "I'll meet you, one last time." The park bench sat empty under a canopy of oak trees, their leaves painted in autumn colors. Grace arrived first, her designer heels clicking against the pathway. She smoothed her skirt and sat down, her fingers fidgeting with her pearl necklace. The familiar bench felt different now, less like a business meeting spot and more like neutral ground between two wounded hearts. Sam approached from the parking lot, his work boots crunching on fallen leaves. He wore his usual flannel shirt and jeans, a stark contrast to Grace's polished appearance. His face was tired, but his eyes held a calm steadiness as he took his place beside her, leaving enough space for another person between them. "Thank you for coming," Grace said softly, her voice lacking its usual polish. She turned slightly toward him, her shoulders tense. "I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few days." Sam nodded, his hands clasped in front of him. "So have I." "I need to tell you something," Grace began, her voice wavering. "All my life, I've measured success by the wrong standards. Prestige, social standing, appearances." She paused, swallowing hard. "I thought I was protecting my foundation's reputation, but really, I was just scared of being seen as anything less than perfect." A jogger passed by, and they waited in silence until the footsteps faded. Sam watched a squirrel dart across the path, gathering acorns for winter. "You know what changed everything?" Grace continued, her eyes fixed on the distance. "Watching you with Lily, the way you'd sit on the floor and build block castles with her, not caring about your suit getting wrinkled. How you'd listen to her stories about magical unicorns like they were the most important things in the world." Sam's expression softened at the mention of Lily. "That little girl," he started, then had to clear his throat. "When she called me daddy that morning over pancakes, something shifted. For the first time since I started working at your estate, I wasn't just the handyman fixing your crown molding. I felt," he searched for the right words, "real." "You were always real, Sam," Grace whispered. "I was the one living in a carefully constructed facade." A cool breeze stirred the leaves above them, sending a few spiraling down. Sam reached out and caught one, turning it over in his calloused hands. "You know what Lucy told me yesterday?" he said, his voice quiet but clear. "She said, sometimes broken people don't lie, they just don't know how to be honest." He looked at Grace, then really looked at her. She's wise beyond her years, that girl. Grace's eyes welled with tears. "I never meant to hurt anyone, especially not Lily. Or Lucy." "I know," Sam nodded, "and that's why I'm here. Not because the scandal needs fixing, or because the project needs saving." He took a deep breath. "I'm here because two little girls believe in something bigger than our mistakes, and maybe they're right." Grace wiped a tear from her cheek, careful not to smudge her makeup. "Can you ever forgive me?" Sam was quiet for a long moment, watching the leaves dance in the breeze. "I already have," he finally said. "Not for your sake, and not even for mine, but for Lucy, who sees the good in everyone, and for Lily, who just wants her family to be whole." Grace's shoulders relaxed slightly, and she turned to face him fully. "Where do we go from here?" "I have a suggestion," Sam said, straightening up. "We start over. No contracts, no pretending, no measuring success by society's standards." He held out his hand. Just faith. In each other. In the project. In whatever this might become. Grace looked at his offered hand, strong, capable, honest. She remembered how those same hands had gently tucked Lily into bed, had fixed broken things around her house, had built dreams on paper. "Just faith," she repeated, and placed her hand in his. This time, when their fingers touched, there was no discomfort to hide, no roles to play. They sat there on the bench, hands joined, watching the autumn day unfold around them. A fresh start, built not on lies or social expectations, but on something far more solid. Truth, forgiveness, and the simple wisdom of children who still believed in second chances. "The project will still need work," Grace said after a while. "We'll figure it out," Sam replied, "one brick at a time." The morning sun cast long shadows across the construction site as Sam adjusted his hard hat and surveyed the ground where Charleston's newest community housing project would soon stand. The sound of machinery filled the air, mixing with excited chatter from the gathering crowd. Grace stood nearby, looking decidedly out of place in her cream-colored pantsuit, though she'd swapped her usual heels for sensible flats. Her face glowed with anticipation as she watched the first excavator roll into position. "Ready?" Sam asked, offering her a bright yellow hard hat. Grace's perfectly manicured fingers brushed against his calloused ones as she took it. "I never thought I'd be excited about getting my hands dirty," she admitted, carefully placing the hat over her styled hair. Lucy and Lily bounced around them, both wearing matching mini hard hats. Lily clutched her favorite stuffed bunny, which now sported its own tiny construction vest, a gift from Sam that had made the little girl squeal with delight. "Can I press the button? Please, please," Lily begged, tugging at Grace's sleeve. "There isn't actually a button, sweetheart," Grace explained, kneeling to meet her goddaughter's eyes. "But you can help, mister." Sam with something even more special. Sam reached into his pocket and pulled out 4 shiny new shovels. "First dig goes to the whole family," he said, then caught himself. "I mean, to all of us." Lucy noticed her father slip and smiled knowingly at Grace, who was trying to hide the pink rising in her cheeks. The local news crews positioned their cameras as volunteers began arriving. Many carried homemade signs. "Second chances, build first homes, and Charleston's heart grows bigger." The controversy that had nearly derailed the project had transformed into something unexpected, a symbol of hope and redemption that resonated throughout the community. "Miss Wentworth," called out Janet Chen, the Channel 5 reporter who'd been following their story. "Could we get a few words before the ceremony?" Grace straightened her shoulders, preparing for another defensive interview, but Sam's steady presence beside her helped calm her nerves. To her surprise, Janet's questions took a different tone entirely. "Your foundation's housing initiative has become something of a local phenomenon," Janet began, microphone extended. "What started as a scandal has evolved into what many are calling Charleston's most inspiring community project. Did you ever imagine it would turn out this way?" Grace glanced at Sam before answering. "Sometimes our biggest mistakes lead us to our truest purpose," she said. "This project isn't about me anymore. It's about families who deserve a chance at stability and dignity." "And Mr. Nolan," Janet turned to Sam, "your original vision for this project was rejected over a year ago. Now you're not only seeing it built, but partnering with the very person who initially turned you down. That's quite a twist." Sam's warm laugh drew smiles from the crowd. "Life has a way of teaching us what really matters. Sometimes you have to tear down walls to build something stronger." Lily, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly piped up from beside them. "And now we're all family," she announced proudly into the microphone, causing ripples of laughter and awes from the onlookers. The reporter's eyes sparkled. "Out of the mouths of babes," she said. "Charleston's unlikely family. I like that." After the interview, the ceremony began in earnest. Sam led Grace, Lucy, and Lily to the marked spot where the first shovel would break ground. Volunteers lined up behind them, tools ready, eager to be part of something bigger than themselves. "Together?" Grace whispered. "Together," Sam confirmed, and they pushed their shovels into the earth as cameras flashed and applause erupted. The next few hours flew by in a blur of activity. Grace surprised everyone by joining the volunteer line, passing boards, and carrying supplies despite her expensive outfit. Lucy and Lily became the unofficial refreshment committee, distributing water bottles and snacks to grateful workers. Sam moved from group to group, teaching basic construction skills and sharing his contagious enthusiasm for the project. Every so often, his eyes would find Grace, and they'd share a quiet smile across the bustling site. By mid-afternoon, the foundation area was marked out, and the first concrete pourings were scheduled for the next day. Volunteers began packing up their tools, exchanging phone numbers, and promises to return. The news crews captured final footage of the day's progress. As the crowd thinned, Grace found herself standing next to Sam, watching Lucy push Lily on an improvised swing they'd hung from a tree branch. Without thinking, she reached for his hand. Sam's fingers entwined with hers naturally, as if they'd been doing this forever. Neither of them spoke, but their joined hands said everything that needed saying. A few remaining photographers noticed and raised their cameras, but for once, Grace didn't care about the headlines. "Look," Lucy called out, pointing to the setting sun, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks above the construction site. "It's like a standing ovation from heaven." Lily clapped her small hands. "Pretty, just like in the fairy tales." Sam squeezed Grace's hand gently, and she squeezed back. They stood there together, four people who had somehow become something more, watching the sun bless the ground where new beginnings would take root and grow. Lucy carefully measured flour into the large mixing bowl, her movements precise and deliberate, while Lily stood on the painted wooden step stool beside her, eagerly clutching a well-worn wooden spoon in both tiny hands. The kitchen in Grace's sprawling estate, usually kept pristine and formal with its gleaming marble surfaces and spotless chrome fixtures, now looked like the most wonderful kind of disaster zone. Scattered chocolate chips dotted the pristine countertops like tiny treasures, while a fine dusting of powdered sugar had somehow managed to coat nearly every surface within a 3-foot radius of their baking station. Flour handprints decorated the front of Lily's bright yellow apron, and a streak of vanilla extract glistened on Lucy's cheek where she'd absently brushed it with the back of her hand. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the tall windows caught the sugar particles in the air, making them sparkle like fairy dust as they danced around the two girls. "Is this enough?" Lily held up the ceramic mixing bowl with both hands, her small face scrunched in serious concentration as she peered down at the creamy mixture they'd been working on for the past 20 minutes. Lucy leaned over to examine their handiwork, brushing a strand of dark hair behind her ear as she considered the consistency. After a moment, she nodded approvingly. "Perfect. Now we add the vanilla extract." She reached for the small brown bottle, then helped steady Lily's eager but unsteady hand as they carefully measured out the aromatic liquid. "These cookies are going to help build homes for people who really need them. Every batch we sell at the fundraiser means another family might have a warm, safe place to sleep, like the houses Daddy Sam is building with his big tools." Lily's eyes absolutely sparkled at the mention of Sam, her whole face lighting up with pure joy and affection. "Exactly like those houses." Lucy's voice carried a warmth that matched her gentle smile. Deeply touched by how naturally and quickly Lily had started calling Sam Daddy, the words seemed to roll off the little girl's tongue without hesitation or awkwardness, as if it had always belonged there. It felt completely right somehow, like puzzle pieces that had been scattered for years finally clicking into their perfect places. Meanwhile, across town at the construction site where the future community would soon take shape, Sam sat quietly in the cab of his well-worn pickup truck, holding a wrinkled piece of paper between his calloused fingers. The letter had been rewritten so many times over the past week that the words were practically burned into his memory, each revision an attempt to capture feelings that seemed too big and too important for simple words. The setting sun painted the expansive sky in brilliant shades of deep pink and burnt orange, casting long, dramatic shadows across the partially completed foundations that dotted the cleared lot like promises waiting to be fulfilled. The rhythmic sound of heels clicking steadily against loose gravel made him lift his head from the letter. Grace approached his truck with her usual confident stride, her designer outfit somehow still completely immaculate, despite having spent the better part of the afternoon walking through the dusty, debris-scattered construction site. But it was her smile that immediately caught and held his attention. Genuine and warm, radiating from her eyes, and absolutely nothing like the careful, practiced, polished society smile she'd worn like armor when they first met all those weeks ago. "The girls called me about 20 minutes ago," Grace said with obvious amusement, gracefully leaning against the side of his truck and crossing her arms. Apparently, they've managed to turn my pristine kitchen into what Lily described as the most amazing cookie factory in the whole wide world. Sam chuckled, the sound low and warm in the evening air. Lucy's always had such a good heart. When she sets her mind on helping with something, there's no stopping her. She wants to contribute to the fundraiser in her own special way. They both do. Grace's voice noticeably softened, taking on the tender tone she seemed to reserve for talking about the children. Lily honestly hasn't stopped talking about her sister Lucy for even a single day this entire week. She's planning their matching outfits for the fundraiser dinner. Sam's weathered hand tightened protectively around the carefully folded letter, his knuckles showing white against the tan of his skin. "Grace, could we maybe walk for a bit? There's something I need to share with you." They made their way slowly and deliberately through the organized chaos of the construction site, stepping carefully around stacked lumber and avoiding the scattered tools that would be secured before nightfall. They walked past the skeletal wooden frames that would soon become sturdy walls and welcoming doorways, homes where families would build memories and find safety. The gentle evening light cast their moving shadows long and intertwined across the packed earth, merging their silhouettes into one unified shape that seemed to stretch toward the horizon. "Do you remember that first day when you tried to hire me as your handyman?" Sam asked after several minutes of comfortable silence, his voice carrying a note of fond nostalgia. Grace laughed softly, the sound musical in the quiet evening air. "You mean when I desperately tried to convince you to be my temporary fake husband instead? That was possibly the most embarrassing conversation of my entire adult life." That conversation, too. Sam's smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. "I was so incredibly angry and hurt when I first discovered you'd rejected my housing proposal without even a proper meeting. I felt like you'd dismissed everything I'd worked for without giving it a fair chance. But now," he paused to gesture broadly at the construction taking shape around them, the foundations and frames that represented hope and new beginnings. "Now, I find myself genuinely grateful for every single mistake, every wrong turn, every moment of confusion that somehow led us here to this exact place." They came to a natural stop at the edge of the property, where a magnificent old oak tree spread its massive, gnarled branches wide like welcoming arms, creating a canopy of green leaves that rustled gently in the evening breeze. Sam reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out the letter, now slightly crumpled from his nervous handling and constant folding and unfolding throughout the day. "I wrote something for you," he said, his voice quiet but steady with determination. "I know I'm not particularly good with fancy words or grand romantic gestures like the men you're probably used to, but I needed to say these things properly to get them exactly right." Grace accepted the letter with hands that trembled slightly, whether from emotion or anticipation, she couldn't say. Sam watched intently as her eyes moved carefully across the page, taking in his thoughtfully chosen words about partnership and commitment, about building something real and lasting together, about how their initially pretend family had somehow transformed into the most genuine and precious thing in his entire life. He'd written extensively about Lucy's smile, returning with a brightness and joy he hadn't seen since her mother's peaceful passing 3 years ago. About little Lily's innocent bedtime prayers for a daddy being answered in ways none of them could have possibly expected or planned. About how Grace's gentle but determined presence in their lives felt like finally coming home after what seemed like an endless, lonely journey through grief and uncertainty. Grace's eyes welled with unshed tears as she read the final paragraphs, where Sam asked not for a traditional marriage proposal with pressure and expectations, but for true partnership in raising their beloved girls with love and wisdom, in building safe homes for families who desperately needed them, in facing together whatever unexpected challenges and joys life might bring their way. He asked her to build a life alongside him, one precious day at a time, with faith and trust as their unshakable foundation. "Sam," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion as she looked up from the carefully written words. In that transformative moment, bathed in golden evening light, she wasn't the polished socialite who graced magazine covers, or the successful businesswoman who commanded boardrooms with authority. She was simply Grace, a woman who had finally found her way home through the most unexpected door imaginable. Taking a step closer until she could feel the warmth radiating from his presence, Grace placed one gentle hand on his chest, right over his steadily beating heart. "I've been waiting my whole life to come home, Sam. I just never knew what home really looked like until now." Their kiss was tender and unhurried, filled with unspoken promises of healing and hope for the future. The setting sun painted them both in liquid gold, while somewhere back in Grace's kitchen, two flour-dusted girls, covered in chocolate and dreams, planned their family's bright tomorrow. In that perfect moment, standing together amid the wooden frameworks of future homes, they had built something far more precious and enduring than any physical structure. A foundation of deep love, hard-won trust, and beautiful second chances that would last far longer than any building ever could. The gentle evening breeze carried the familiar sense of fresh sawdust and infinite new beginnings, while their shadows stretched long and joined across the ground, united as one in the fading golden light. While Lucy and Lily worked on their cookie dough, Lily spotted an envelope peeking out from Sam's jacket draped over a kitchen chair. With flour-covered fingers, she plucked it out, curiosity sparkling in her eyes. "Look, Lucy, it has Mommy Grace's name on it." Lily waved the envelope. Lucy's eyes widened. "Lily, we shouldn't." But Lily had already pulled out the letter, her 7-year-old enthusiasm impossible to contain. Her lips moved slowly as she read the words she understood. "Dear Grace," and "partnership," and "family. They're getting married." Lily squealed, jumping up and down, sending a cloud of flour into the air. Like a real fairy tale. Lucy tried to grab the money. Letter. "Lily, that's private." But Lily was already racing through the house. Letter clutched to her chest, leaving tiny footprints in her wake. Mommy Grace and Daddy Sam are getting married. The next morning at Lily's elementary school, the excitement bubbled over. During show and tell, Lily stood in front of her class, practically bouncing. "My daddy wrote my mommy the most beautiful letter," she announced proudly. "They're going to be together forever, just like in the movies." Her teacher, Mrs. Bennett, smiled kindly. "That's wonderful, Lily. Is this the same gentleman who's been picking you up from school?" "Yes, he's my real daddy now, and Lucy's going to be my real sister." Lily's eyes sparkled with pure joy. The news spread through the school like wildfire, as children's news often does. By pickup time, several parents were discussing it in the carpool line. When Sam arrived to collect Lily, 3 mothers approached to congratulate him. Sam's face flushed with confusion. "I'm sorry, what?" "The wedding," Lily told everyone today. "We're so happy for you and Miss Wentworth." Back in the car, Sam gently asked Lily about her day. She bounced in her car seat, retelling how she'd shared their special news with her whole class. "Sweetheart," Sam said carefully, "did you read the letter in my jacket?" Lily's excitement dimmed slightly. "Was that bad?" Sam parked the car in Grace's driveway and turned to face her. "That letter was private, honey. And while I did ask Grace something very important, it wasn't exactly about marriage." Lily's lower lip trembled. But you love her, right?" Sam's expression softened. "Yes, I do, very much. And I love you too. But grown-up relationships need time to grow, like the flowers in Grace's garden. We can't rush them." Grace met them at the door, having already received several congratulatory texts from school parents. Her eyes held a mix of amusement and concern. They sat Lily down in the living room, where sunshine streamed through tall windows and caught the tears gathering in her eyes. Grace held her small hand while Sam explained. "The letter was about being partners," Sam said gently. "About building a family together, step by step. It's like constructing one of our houses. We need a strong foundation first." "But you're still my daddy?" Lily's voice was small and uncertain. Grace squeezed her hand. "Nothing changes that, sweetheart. Sam loves you, and I love you, and Lucy loves you. We're already a family in all the ways that matter most." That evening, after homework and dinner, Lily found Sam in the garden. He sat on the wooden bench he'd built last month, watching the sunset paint the sky in soft pinks and oranges. She climbed onto his lap, something she'd started doing naturally, as if she'd always belonged there. "Daddy Sam?" she whispered. "Yes, sweetheart. Are you really my daddy now?" Her eyes searched his face, holding all the hope and fear a child could possess. Sam wrapped his arms around her, his heart full. "Yes, sweetheart. Forever, if you'll have me." Lily buried her face in his shirt, breathing in the familiar scent of sawdust and safety. "I want that more than anything." Later that night, Lucy and Lily lay in Lucy's bed, having convinced their parents to let them have a sleepover. The room was dark except for a small nightlight casting star shapes on the ceiling. "I'm sorry I made everyone think they were getting married," Lily whispered. Lucy squeezed her hand. "It's okay. Sometimes when you want something so much, it feels real already." "Do you think they will, someday?" "I think," Lucy said thoughtfully, "that real love is better than fairy tales. Because it's messy and takes time. But it's true. The girls fell silent, their small hands still clasped together. Soon, their breathing evened out as they drifted to sleep. Two sisters in all but name, holding onto each other and their shared dreams of family. Sam and Grace found them like that an hour later, Lily's dark curls mixed with Lucy's straight brown hair on the pillow, their hands still joined even in sleep. They stood in the doorway, watching their daughter's peaceful faces. Grace leaned her head against Sam's shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around her waist. No words were needed. The letter in his jacket pocket had asked for exactly this. Not a fairy tale, but something far more precious. A real family, built on truth and trust and time. The morning sun filtered through Charleston's ancient oak trees, casting intricate patterns of dappled shadows across the community center's freshly mowed lawn. Wooden folding chairs had appeared mysteriously overnight, arranged in perfectly neat rows that stretched beneath the sprawling canopy. Paper lanterns in soft pastels hung from thick, gnarled branches, swaying gently like peaceful prayers in the warm spring breeze. The air carried the sweet perfume of blooming jasmine and the earthy scent of Spanish moss. Sam stood in his workshop, hands slightly trembling as he examined his reflection in the dusty mirror propped against his workbench. He wore his best navy button-down shirt, actually pressed this time thanks to Lucy's careful attention, and clean khaki pants that didn't bear the usual traces of sawdust and wood stain. No tuxedo, no fancy designer suit like the ones he'd seen Grace's circle wear, just Sam, exactly as he was, exactly as God had made him. The mirror showed a man who'd been broken, but was healing. Lines around his eyes spoke of both sorrow and newfound joy. His calloused hands, strong from years of building homes for others, now shook with the anticipation of building something entirely new. A real marriage, a real family. Dad? Lucy's voice drifted through the workshop door as she poked her head inside, her face practically glowing with barely contained excitement. You might want to come outside. What's going on out there? Sam raised an eyebrow, brushing a final speck of sawdust from his sleeve. Through the window, he could hear the soft murmur of voices and what sounded like children laughing. Sounds like half the neighborhood's gathered in our yard. Oh, nothing much. Lucy's grin widened until her whole face seemed to shine. Just about half of Charleston waiting out there to surprise you and Grace. Maybe the whole town, actually. Sam's heart skipped a beat, then began racing. What do you mean, surprise us? A flutter of nervousness mixed with anticipation stirred in his chest. After everything they'd been through, the scandal, the judgment, the slow rebuilding of trust, he couldn't imagine what the community might have planned. Come on! Lucy grabbed his arm, practically bouncing on her toes with the kind of excitement that reminded him of when she was little. They'd been planning this for weeks. Pastor Boone helped organize everything. Even Mrs. Peterson brought her famous sweet tea. Outside, Sam stepped into the warm morning light and his jaw dropped. The sight before him made his throat tighten with emotion. Dozens of familiar faces beamed back at him. Weathered hands of volunteers from the housing project who'd worked beside him in the scorching sun, well-dressed donors who'd stuck by them through the worst of the scandal, families from church whose children had played in his workshop, and neighborhood kids whose bicycles he'd repaired countless times. At the center of it all stood a simple wooden arch he'd built just last month for a young couple's backyard wedding, now draped with cascading wildflowers that Lucy and some of the church ladies must have gathered at dawn. White roses intertwined with native honeysuckle, creating a canopy that was both elegant and perfectly Charleston. We couldn't wait anymore. Mrs. Peterson announced from her lawn chair in the front row, her weathered face creased with joy. The elderly woman had been their neighbor for years, bringing casseroles after Sam's wife died and watching Lucy after school. You two needed a little push. Love like yours shouldn't wait for perfect timing. Before Sam could find his voice to respond, the soft sound of car tires on gravel drew everyone's attention. Grace stepped out of her modest sedan. She'd traded the luxury car for something more practical months ago, looking every bit as surprised as Sam felt. She wore a simple blue sundress that complemented her eyes, her usually perfect hair loose and flowing around her shoulders in soft waves. The morning light caught the subtle sheen of tears already gathering in her eyes. Lily bounced beside her like a spring lamb, clutching a small wicker basket overflowing with flower petals that someone had clearly prepared for her. The little girl's face radiated pure joy, her earlier sadness replaced by the kind of hope that only children possess so completely. What is all this? Grace whispered as she approached Sam, her voice thick with emotion. Her fingers reached out instinctively, finding his hand and holding tight. I thought we were just coming by to check on the workshop. Apparently, we're having a commitment ceremony. Sam chuckled softly, his own voice rough with unexpected emotion. Lucy and half of Charleston seem to have conspired against us. You okay with that? Grace's eyes welled up, tears threatening to spill over. She looked around at the faces surrounding them, people who'd watched their journey from pretense to genuine love, who'd seen them stumble and rise again. More than okay, she managed, squeezing his hand. I can't think of anything more perfect. Pastor Boone stepped forward from the crowd, his well-worn Bible in hand, and his grandfatherly face creased with the kind of smile that had comforted countless souls. Nothing formal today, he assured them with a warm chuckle. No legal papers or fancy certificates, just love and community bearing witness to what God's already written on your hearts. The gathering was everything. Their fake marriage ceremony at Grace's mansion wasn't. Genuine, humble, and filled with the kind of raw emotion that couldn't be purchased or performed. Children sat cross-legged on colorful quilts spread over the grass, some braiding dandelions, while others simply stared up at the adults with wide, wondering eyes. Someone's golden retriever wandered through the chairs with tail wagging, completely at ease in the loving chaos. The spring breeze carried not just the scent of magnolias, but the sound of genuine laughter and whispered prayers. When Pastor Boone gestured for them to speak their hearts, Sam stepped forward first. The crowd fell silent, even the children sensing the sacred moment. His voice was steady and clear, carrying across the gathering like a bell. Grace, he began, his eyes never leaving her face. You hired me to fix broken things in your house. But somewhere between replacing floorboards and painting walls, you ended up fixing the broken places in me instead. You and Lily showed me that love doesn't end with loss. It just waits patiently for the right moment to bloom again, like these oak trees that weather every storm and still grow stronger. Grace wiped away a tear that had escaped, her free hand still clutching his as if he might disappear. When she spoke, her voice carried the strength she'd discovered in these months of learning what real love looked like. Sam, you taught me that real worth isn't measured in square footage or social standing or bank account numbers. It's measured in the strength of your character and the truth in your promises. You and Lucy didn't just help me build houses for families in need. You helped me build something more precious than any mansion I ever owned. You helped me build a family built on love, not pretense, the crowd murmured softly, many dabbing at their own eyes. But then Lily tugged insistently at Grace's dress, her small voice piping up with childlike determination. Can I say something too, please? Gentle laughter rippled through the gathering as Grace lifted the little girl onto her hip. Lily's voice rang out clear and sweet, carrying the simple truth that adults often made complicated. I always prayed for a daddy who could fix things when they broke, she announced to the crowd with 7-year-old solemnity. But Sam fixed our hearts instead. That's even better than fixing toys or bicycles. Lucy stepped forward then, her acoustic guitar in hand, the same instrument her mother had taught her to play years ago. She strummed a simple melody, one she'd been practicing in secret, while Pastor Boone spoke about love, faith, and the kind of second chances that only grace could provide. The soft music drifted over the gathering like a blessing, and there wasn't a dry eye to be found. Grace reached into her small purse and pulled out a delicate velvet box she'd been carrying for weeks, waiting for the right moment. Inside was a silver bracelet, simple but beautiful, with a small heart charm that caught the morning light. Lucy, she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion, I know you had a wonderful mother who loved you deeply. I would never try to replace her or take away those precious memories. But I'd be deeply honored to be your other mom, if you'll have me in that role. Lucy's hands trembled as Grace fastened the bracelet around her wrist with gentle fingers. The teenager stared at the silver chain for a moment, then threw her arms around Grace's neck, holding tight while happy tears streamed down both their faces. Pastor Boone's words were simple but profound, carrying the weight of Scripture and the warmth of a grandfather's blessing. Sam and Grace, before God and this community that loves you both, do you promise to love each other faithfully, support each other through joy and sorrow, and build a life together grounded in faith and truth? We do, they answered in unison, their voices, strong and certain. No rings were exchanged. They'd handle that detail properly later, perhaps in a quiet moment just between them. Instead, Sam reached for Lily, swinging her up onto his broad shoulders as everyone burst into applause and cheers. Grace took Lucy's hand, her heart so full she thought it might burst. and together they walked down the makeshift aisle under the ancient oaks that had witnessed countless seasons of growth and change. Someone, probably Mrs. Peterson and her quilting circle, had decorated Sam's old pickup truck with colorful streamers and a hand-painted sign that read, "Finally Real," in cheerful script. The ancient engine sputtered to life with its familiar rumble as Sam helped Grace into the passenger seat, his hand lingering on hers. "Where are we going?" Grace laughed as Sam pulled away from the curb, waving at the crowd of well-wishers who'd made their spontaneous ceremony possible. "Does it matter anymore?" He grinned, reaching for her hand and intertwining their fingers. "We're already home, wherever we are together." The old truck rattled down the oak-lined street, their laughter trailing behind them like music carried on the sweet Charleston breeze. Through the rearview mirror, Sam could see Lucy and Lily waving enthusiastically, their faces glowing with the kind of joy that comes from witnessing love triumph over fear. The girls would join them later for a family dinner, their first official meal as a real family. But for now, this golden moment belonged to just the two of them and the promise of all the tomorrows they'd build together. The autumn breeze rustled through the newly planted saplings, lining the freshly paved walkway. Sam Nolan stood beside Grace, watching as Michelle Torres, a young single mother, clutched her house keys with trembling fingers. Her 7-year-old son Diego bounced excitedly beside her, his backpack still on from school. "I can't believe this is really happening," Michelle whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She'd been living in her cousin's cramped apartment for the past year, working 2 jobs to save for a place of their own. Sam stepped forward, his work boots leaving prints in the fresh mulch. "Would you like to do the honors?" he asked, gesturing to the dark blue door with its gleaming brass knocker. Diego tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Can I do it, Mama, please?" Michelle nodded, handing the key to her son. Grace squeezed Sam's hand as they watched Diego struggle with the lock for a moment before the door swung open with a satisfying click. The interior welcomed them with the smell of fresh paint and new carpeting. Sunlight streamed through energy-efficient windows, illuminating the open-concept living area. The kitchen featured modest but sturdy appliances, and built-in shelving lined one wall, all crafted by Sam's hands. "Look, Mama!" Diego ran to the window seat in the living room. "I can read here and watch the birds." Michelle's eyes welled up as she took in the space. "It's perfect," she managed. "I never thought." Grace stepped forward, her designer instincts evident in the thoughtful touches throughout the home. The cheerful yellow accent wall, the clever storage solutions, the durable but attractive flooring. "Every family deserves a beautiful place to call home," she said softly. They moved through the house, showing Michelle and Diego each carefully planned feature. The 2 bedrooms were painted in soothing colors, with Diego's room sporting a built-in desk for homework. The bathroom had a deep tub and plenty of storage, while the laundry area included a folding station and organizers. "And this," Sam said, leading them to the small backyard, "is your garden space. We've prepared the soil, and there's a starter kit for vegetables in the shed." Diego's eyes widened. "We can grow our own food?" "Just like we talked about in the community meetings," Grace confirmed, smiling at his enthusiasm. "And Michelle, remember, there's a monthly gardening workshop at the center." They returned to the living room, where Sam paused near the entryway. He'd been quiet for the last few minutes, his thoughts elsewhere. Grace noticed his expression and knew exactly what was coming. "There's one more thing we'd like to show you," she said gently, leading them to a wall near the front door. A simple bronze plaque hung there, its surface catching the afternoon light. Michelle stepped closer to read the inscription. "In loving memory of Sarah Nolan, who believed every family deserves a place to call home, may her dream live on in these walls." Sam's throat tightened as he looked at the plaque. Grace's hand found his again, her thumb tracing small circles on his palm. She could feel the slight tremor in his fingers. "Sarah was my late wife," Sam explained, his voice soft but steady. "She used to say that a house wasn't just walls and a roof, it was a foundation for dreams." She'd sketch house plans on napkins during her hospital stays, talking about how someday we'd build homes for families who needed them. Michelle reached out and touched the plaque gently. "Thank you for sharing her dream with us," she said. "I promise to honor her memory by making this a real home." Diego looked up at Sam with solemn eyes. "Was she an angel?" Sam knelt down to the boy's level. "You know what? I think she still is. And I bet she's smiling right now, seeing you and your mama starting your new chapter here." Grace watched as Sam interacted with Diego, her heart full. She remembered the day she'd first met him, how she'd dismissed him as just another handyman. Now she knew better. He was a builder of not just houses, but of hope. Michelle was walking around the living room again, running her hands over the smooth walls, already planning where to place the few pieces of furniture they owned. "I can't wait to tell my mama," she said. "She's been so worried about us." "The moving truck should be here within the hour," Grace reminded her. "And remember, the community welcome dinner is tonight at 6. Everyone's excited to meet you properly." Diego tugged at his mother's sleeve again. "Can I go pick my room now? For real?" "Go ahead, mijo," Michelle laughed, watching as he raced down the hallway. As Diego's footsteps echoed through the house, Sam stood before the plaque, his fingers tracing the letters of Sarah's name. Grace wrapped her arm around his waist, leaning her head against his shoulder. "She would be proud of you," Grace whispered, echoing the words she'd been holding in her heart all morning. Sam's eyes were bright with unshed tears, but his smile was genuine. He nodded slowly, his voice barely audible. "She is." The December air filled with the scent of pine and cinnamon as Grace balanced carefully on a stepladder, hanging delicate glass ornaments on the towering Christmas tree. Lucy stood below, untangling a string of white lights with practiced patience. A little to the left, "Mom," Lucy called up, using the term that had slipped naturally into their conversations over the past few months. Grace's heart warmed at the word, just as it did every time. "Here?" Grace adjusted the sparkling angel ornament. "Perfect," Lucy beamed, her dark hair catching the twinkling lights. "This tree is going to be amazing when we're done." Through the large window of their living room in the community center, Grace could see Sam and Lily bundled up against the cold, sitting at a wooden workbench he'd set up on the covered porch. Small curls of wood shavings fell around them like pale confetti as Sam guided Lily's small hands holding the carving tool. "Careful now, princess." Sam's voice carried through the glass. "Nice and slow, just like I showed you." Lily's tongue poked out in concentration as she worked on the small piece of wood. Her pink winter hat was dusted with wood shavings, making her look like she'd been caught in a tiny snowstorm. "Look, Daddy!" Lily held up her creation proudly. "It's starting to look like a star." Grace stepped down from the ladder and moved to the window, watching as Sam examined the wooden ornament with exaggerated seriousness. "Well, would you look at that? You're a natural, sweetheart. Just needs a little sanding here." He demonstrated the gentle motion, and Lily copied him with determination. Lucy appeared beside Grace, both of them watching the scene unfold. "He's so good with her," Lucy said softly, "just like he was with me when Mom died. He always knows exactly what someone needs." Grace squeezed Lucy's shoulder. "That's one of the many reasons I fell in love with him." The afternoon passed in a flutter of activity as they prepared for the community dinner. The center's large dining room slowly filled with the warm aromas of roasting turkey and fresh-baked rolls. Residents from the newly completed homes began arriving, carrying dishes and wearing bright holiday sweaters. Michelle Torres and her son Diego came in from the cold, their cheeks pink from the winter air. "We brought tamales," Diego announced proudly, holding up a covered dish. "Mama's special recipe." More families filtered in. The Washingtons with their twins, elderly Mr. Chen, who'd become everyone's honorary grandfather, and Sarah Miller, a young teacher who'd moved in last month. The room hummed with conversation and laughter as people settled around the long tables Sam had built himself. Before the meal, Sam stood and gently tapped his glass. The room quieted as he cleared his throat. "A year ago, I was just a handyman with a dream of building something meaningful. Now, looking around this room, I see that dream has become so much more than houses. It's become a family." His eyes met Grace's across the room. And speaking of family, Grace rose and joined him, reaching into her pocket. "Lily, sweetheart, could you come here?" Lily bounced up from her seat next to Lucy, her eyes bright with curiosity. Grace knelt down to her level and pulled out a small velvet box. "This is for you, my sweet girl." Grace opened the box to reveal a delicate silver locket. "Look inside." Lily's small fingers worked the clasp, and her eyes widened at the inscription. "Chosen, loved, home," she read carefully, then looked up at Grace with tears sparkling in her eyes. "Like me?" "Yes, my darling, just like you." Grace's voice wavered as she helped Lily fasten the necklace. Because family isn't just about who we're born to, it's about who we choose to love and who chooses to love us back. Sam wrapped his arms around both of them, and Lucy joined the embrace. Around them, the room burst into applause, and a few emotional sniffs could be heard. The evening progressed with shared meals, stories, and carols. Children ran between the tables playing tag while parents chatted over coffee and pie. Through the windows, they could see the first snowflakes beginning to fall, turning the world outside into a gentle wonderland. As the party wound down and the last guest headed home through the softly falling snow, the four of them settled in front of the crackling fireplace in the center's cozy sitting room. Lily curled up in Sam's lap, her new locket gleaming in the firelight as she dozed. Lucy leaned against Grace's shoulder, both of them covered in a warm blanket. "Look," Lucy whispered, pointing to the window. "The snow's getting heavier." They watched in comfortable silence as the flakes danced past the window, coating the world in pristine white. The fire popped and crackled, casting warm shadows across their faces. Sam reached over and took Grace's hand, their fingers intertwining naturally, perfectly, like they'd always been meant to find each other. The wooden star Lily had carved earlier sat proudly on the mantel, slightly crooked, but full of love, catching the flickering firelight. Below it, stockings hung in a row, no longer four separate people, but one family, brought together by chance, choice, and love. The snow continued to fall outside their window, each flake a tiny miracle, just like the larger miracle of their unlikely family finding its way home to each other. The grand ballroom of the Charleston Heritage Hotel sparkled with the same opulent chandeliers and gleaming marble floors as the year before. But Grace Wentworth stood in front of her mirror, feeling like a completely different woman. Her fingers smoothed down the midnight blue silk gown, simpler than last year's designer piece, but somehow more elegant. "You look beautiful," Sam said from the doorway, adjusting his bow tie. He'd grown more comfortable in formal wear, but still carried himself with that down-to-earth genuineness that had first caught her attention. Grace smiled at his reflection. "Hard to believe it's been a year since we danced here. When I was your fake husband?" Sam's eyes crinkled with amusement. "Feels like another lifetime." Lucy appeared behind them, looking grown-up in her first formal dress. "Dad, Lily needs help with her shoes. She says only you can tie the bows right." Sam chuckled and headed down the hall. Grace watched him go, her heart full. The past year had transformed everything, not just their relationship, but her entire worldview. The Foundation's annual gala used to be about impressing donors and maintaining an image. Now it was about sharing genuine hope. The ballroom hummed with conversation as they arrived. Grace noticed several faces from last year, but their reactions were different. Instead of the usual social posturing, she received warm smiles and genuine greetings. Word had spread about the housing project's success, and even former critics had come around. Lily tugged at Grace's hand. "Can I sit with Lucy at the big table?" "Of course, sweetheart." Grace smoothed Lily's curls. "Just remember what we practiced about fancy dinner manners." I know. Small bites and napkin on my lap." Lily skipped off to join her sister, their matching dresses swishing. Sam squeezed Grace's hand. "Ready for your speech?" She took a deep breath. Different kind of nervous this time. Good nervous. The evening progressed through dinner and preliminary presentations. Grace noticed how naturally Sam chatted with everyone around him, from CEOs to the waiting staff. He didn't need coaching anymore. His authentic warmth drew people in. When it was time for her keynote address, Grace approached the podium with steady steps. The spotlight felt warmer than she remembered. "A year ago, I stood on this stage and talked about success metrics and funding goals," she began. "I had everything perfectly scripted, just like I thought my life should be." A knowing chuckle rippled through the crowd. But life has a way of unraveling our perfect scripts. Sometimes that unraveling is exactly what we need. She caught Sam's eye in the audience. He nodded encouragingly. "Many of you know parts of our story, the headlines, rumors, the scandal. But tonight, I want to share something different. I want to talk about healing." Grace described the housing project not with statistics, but with stories. She told them about Maria, a single mom who'd moved in last month and now had a safe place to raise her kids. About Jorge, who finally had a stable address to put on job applications. About communities coming together to build something lasting. "A year ago, I measured success by numbers in a spreadsheet. Now I measure it by the light in a child's eyes when they see their new home, by the tears of joy when a parent can finally give their kids a backyard." Her voice grew soft but strong. "I measured love by status and appearance. Now I measure it by morning coffee shared in comfortable silence, by bedtime stories and homework help, by the simple act of showing up for each other every day." She could see misty eyes in the audience. Sam wasn't even trying to hide his tears. Life rarely goes according to plan. Grace continued. "Sometimes our first chapters end in ways we never expected, but I've learned something beautiful. Sometimes your second chapter is your best. Because it's written with wisdom, with humility, and with a heart that's learned how to truly love. The applause that followed wasn't the polite society clapping she was used to. It was genuine, emotional, and sustained. As she stepped down from the podium, several people reached out to squeeze her hand or pat her shoulder. Later, as the orchestra began playing a familiar waltz, Sam appeared at her side. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Nolan?" Grace smiled at the name. Not yet official, but soon. Always. They moved onto the dance floor, his hand warm and steady at her waist. It was the same song they'd danced to a year ago, when everything between them had been pretense and uncertainty. "Remember how nervous we were last time?" she whispered. "Terrified," Sam admitted with a soft laugh. "Afraid I'd step on your dress, or say the wrong thing." "And now?" He pulled her closer, their movements perfectly in sync. "Now I'm just grateful, for second chances, for healing, for you." Grace rested her head on his shoulder as they swayed to the music. Across the room, she could see Lucy and Lily sharing cookies at their table, giggling together like real sisters. The sight made her heart swell. "Thank you," she murmured against Sam's jacket. "For what?" "For seeing past my walls, for giving me a chance to be real." Sam's hand tightened on hers as they turned. Other couples danced around them, but Grace barely noticed. In this moment, their world had narrowed to just this: the music, the gentle movement, and the profound rightness of being in each other's arms. The song should have ended, but they kept dancing. No one seemed to mind. Grace closed her eyes, letting herself sink into the peace of belonging. There was no need to impress anyone, no need to maintain an image, just the quiet joy of being exactly where she was meant to be. Sam hummed along with the music, the vibration soft against her cheek. They moved together without thinking, two hearts beating in perfect time. This wasn't just a dance anymore. It was a promise, a celebration, a homecoming. And this time, they didn't let go. The morning sun painted long shadows across the empty lot where Charleston's newest housing block would soon rise. Construction equipment stood ready, their yellow paint gleaming against the backdrop of towering oak trees draped in Spanish moss. A gentle breeze carried the scent of jasmine and fresh coffee from the gathering crowd. Sam Nolan adjusted his worn work boots, watching as families began to arrive for the groundbreaking ceremony. Some were future residents, others supporters, all wearing bright smiles that matched the morning light. His calloused hands held a small pink hammer, its handle decorated with butterfly stickers. "Is it time yet, Daddy?" Lily bounced on her toes beside him, her dark curls tied back with ribbons that matched her sundress. At 7 years old, she had grown taller, but her eyes still held that same magical spark that had first melted his heart. "Almost, sweetheart," Sam said, kneeling down to her level. "Remember what we practiced?" Lily nodded solemnly. "Hit the ground 3 times and say, 'Welcome home.' That's my girl." He handed her the hammer, watching her clutch it with determined little fingers. Lucy appeared beside them, her college acceptance letter folded carefully in her back pocket. She'd been carrying it everywhere since it arrived last week. "The camera crew is setting up," she said, adjusting her Charleston University cap. "And Grace is finishing up with the donors." Sam's heart swelled as he watched his older daughter. She'd grown so much this past year, not just in height, but in wisdom. The way she'd embraced their new family, how she'd helped Lily adjust, how she'd supported his journey back to love, it all made him prouder than any building he'd ever raised. "You nervous about leaving for college?" he asked softly. Lucy smiled, the same gentle smile her mother used to have. "A little, but I'm only across town. Besides," she glanced at Grace, who was making her way toward them. "I've got 2 homes now." Grace joined their small circle, looking elegant as always in her tailored blazer, but with a softness that hadn't been there before. She'd traded her designer heels for practical flats, perfect for walking construction sites. Her hand found Sam's naturally, their fingers intertwining. "The crew's ready," she said, giving his hand a squeeze. "They want some footage before the official ceremony." A young reporter approached with her cameraman, microphone ready. "Mr. and Mrs. Nolan, we'd love to get your thoughts on what today means for the community." Sam and Grace exchanged a look at the Mrs. Nolan. They still weren't officially married, but somehow it felt right, natural, like everything else had become between them. "The cameras are rolling," the reporter said. "Mr. Nolan, what would you say built this community?" Sam looked at his family, Lucy standing tall and proud, Lily clutching her pink hammer, Grace's hand warm in his, and smiled. "Faith," he said simply, "and one stubborn woman who taught me that sometimes the best foundations aren't made of concrete." Grace blushed, but her eyes shone with pride. The reporter turned to her next. Miss Wentworth, did you ever imagine your foundation would take this direction? Honestly, no. Grace pulled Lily closer with her free hand. I used to think success meant impressive buildings and prestigious names. But real legacy? She looked at Sam. It's in the lives we touch, the families we help, the love we share. More people gathered around them as the ceremony's start time approached. Sam recognized faces from their journey, volunteers who'd helped with construction, donors who'd stayed loyal through the scandal, families who'd found hope in their first completed units. The podium stood ready, decorated with fresh flowers. Behind it, architectural renderings showed the future building. 3 stories of thoughtfully designed apartments, a community garden, and a playground that Lily had helped design. With extra swings, "Daddy! Places, everyone!" the event coordinator called. They gathered at the marked spot where the foundation would begin. Sam handed out golden shovels to the officials, but his eyes were on Lily, still clutching her pink hammer with determination. "Ladies and gentlemen," Grace began her speech, her voice clear and strong. "A year ago, I stood at a different podium, wearing a different mask. Today, I stand here as myself, someone who learned that the greatest designs aren't found in magazines, but in the blueprint of an open heart." The crowd applauded, and Sam felt Lucy slip her hand into his free one. His daughter leaned close and whispered, "Mom would be so proud of us." "Dad," Sam squeezed her hand, knowing it was true. His late wife had always believed in building something meaningful. Now, looking at the family surrounding him, he knew he'd built something more precious than he'd ever dreamed possible. "Ready?" Grace asked, picking up her shovel. Together, they broke ground. Lily's pink hammer hit the earth 3 times, her voice ringing out clear and sweet. "Welcome home! Welcome home! Welcome home!" Laughter and cheers erupted from the crowd. Camera flashes captured the moment, Sam and Grace with their shovels, Lucy beaming beside them, Lily celebrating with her hammer raised high. But the cameras couldn't capture the feeling in Sam's heart. The absolute certainty that this was exactly where he was meant to be. As dusk began to paint the sky in soft oranges and pinks, the crowd thinned out. Families lingered, sharing stories and dreams of their future homes. Lucy taught Lily how to make daisy chains in the grass, while Sam and Grace stood together, watching their daughters. Grace leaned against Sam's shoulder, her voice soft with contentment. "This is home," she whispered. And Sam knew she wasn't just talking about the building they'd break ground for. She meant this, their family, their love, their shared purpose, all of it. Sam wrapped his arm around her waist, holding her close as the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Around them, the sound of children's laughter mixed with adult conversation, creating a symphony of community, of belonging, of love. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Sam Nolan, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.